We'll start with the beginning. Appointment, Southampton representative to the Franklin Regional Transportation Authority. Appointment, Edward Gibson. This normally has been occurring to be the town administrator to do this task. Does Ed have any comments to this?
No comments.
So I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Congratulations, Ed.
Oh, thank you, I appreciate it.
Moving on up. Be careful what bus you get on.
Yep.
We have a hearing, One Day Beer and Wine, The Beer Guy, LLC, for Southampton Harley Davidson Chili Fest, Saturday, March 24th, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Amended 3/20/2018. That was, we had to modify our agenda because this was a late entry at the track.
Yes, it was. I'm sorry, I was asked at the last minute if I could provide them with a beverage trailer.
Could you identify yourself?
My name is David Capriati. I own the company, The Beer Guy LLC, and I can tell you a little bit about it, what we do. I have a 20-foot high-end beer and wine and beverage trailer. We not just beer and wine, we do soda, water, juice boxes, we service kegs, we service baseball games, we service anything where somebody needs some type of a beverage to perform. I contacted Katie at Southampton Harley Davidson, and she informed me they were doing a chili cook-off contest and that they didn't have any beverages to be able to serve. And I said, well, we are available that date. We came to an agreement. It is for a benefit charity for the Mustard Seed Foundation. Dr. Bigda is going to stand up on the roof there for probably 5-6 hours again. It's gonna be, I don't know if it's going to be cold for him or not, but so far I understand there's 35, maybe 40 chili vendors that are going to be there. And we're going to donate 50% of our proceeds to the cause for him. So we're pretty much doing it at cost to them to help them out, get our name out there. We are a new business from 2017 through Ralph Scaramucci from the ABCC. Allowed us to start this business in the state of Massachusetts. So we are exclusive to Massachusetts, and we have the one license that's available in Massachusetts to actually have a beverage trailer through them. Attorney Ed Ryan set this business up for us. So,
Now, where are you out of?
we're out of South Hadley. We're local.
Okay.
I grew up in Amherst. I grew up in Leverett on a horse farm.
Yep.
I'm a contractor by trade, and I needed some alternative business because I'm wearing myself out with building homes.
Long Plain Road?
Excuse me?
Long Plain Road?
We're on Mountain View Street in South Hadley.
Right off
No,
202.
you grew up at the farm.
Yeah.
Long Plain Road.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. It makes him uneasy. He's trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Don't worry,
This is my
we're
first
still
time
trying to figure out too, so it's,
We just came off a crazy weekend. We did the St. Patrick's Day Parade and the road race, and it was absolutely exhausting for us. So,
Ed, are all paperwork in order?
All the paperwork is in order. I talked to Keith Goyette about it. This has been going on for a number of years.
Yeah.
Familiar with the event, he has no concern.
I hear a motion to approve the license?
I'll make the motion as long as the fees are paid and all paperwork's in order.
It is.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks for your donation.
You're welcome to stop by, and
I'll be there.
you'll be stop by.
Don't run off.
No, I won't.
That doesn't sound like Ed.
Yeah, but it was over his side.
Here you go.
Are you a chili eater? I am. I can't wait.
You're working there, you're not testing, right?
I could do that.
I'm actually gonna see if I can be one of the judges there, because they asked.
Oh, really?
If people could sign up for being judge, you make a $5 donation, you can test all their chili, and,
That's worth it.
yeah. I do the chili festival that they have in Boston, and
All right.
I love it, it's great. It's a long day, but it's good.
At the end of the day, you're full.
Oh, yeah, you're full.
We'll see you there.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
He's making a copy of your license. Snag him in the hallway when he comes
Okay.
by, because we're closed tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have to give that to Williams Distributing, because that's who
Yeah.
I do all my purchasing through.
Good.
Yep. Thank you, I'll see you there
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
Come over to the trailer.
Saturday, I'll see you.
Yeah, I mean Saturday, yeah.
Saturday, yeah.
You too, that going tomorrow. All right, we're gonna take a minute and wait until the town administrator gets back. You wanna jump down to Select Board Annual Town Report? We drafted that. Do we see any concerns for the redrafts? Going once?
No, it's typical, though, to add all the expenses that Velda had added.
Historically, that's what they've been doing.
Okay.
I mean, personally,
I was
I'm
gonna say-
surprised
yeah,
it's
me
there.
too.
Yeah.
But it's fine. I'll make a motion to approve the annual town report by the Select Board.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Our clerk has got that? Okay, so that one's out of the way. This is really gonna confuse Ed. What's the pleasure of the board? Where do we wanna jump?
I'll do
Two
this.
liaisons while we're here.
Yeah.
All right,
Above it.
Select Board liaisons for Board of Health and Board of Assessors. Let's do Board of Health first. I've been thinking about this, and originally I was sort of backing away from it because of the fact that I've been training boards of health in most of my career. But I'm also the town's EMD now, and I need to sit down with that board and start discussing shelters and agreements and food establishments and stuff like that. So at least in the short term, I'd like to be the liaison to the Board of Health, just because I'm gonna start that up. And you saw my email come out as DMD a couple of days ago
Yeah.
with where we're going. Well, there's a whole data section of that thing that I gotta work on. I'm gonna tell you right now, it's gonna take 6 months to put all that together. But that's my feeling.
I mean, I don't think there's anybody more qualified, so
Mhm.
I'm fine with it. I think it's a good deal.
I'm not looking at this as long-term. I'm looking like, 6 months or so until I can get the.
Well, I'd like to just suggest that it only be until we regroup with, after the election, because I was the liaison, and I only switched off of it because Jim was on the assessors, and it was requested that he come off the assessors during the time of the TIF agreement.
Yeah.
So the original plan was for me to return to the Board of Health and for Jim to return to the assessors. But I'm fine if you have things you need to do to get that off to the state and be the liaison, but I'd only request that it be until we relook at the liaison assignments. Because the liaison assignments, they're very confusing because we had a lot of liaison assignments that were to departments. We had one to the highway department, fire department, and now that we have a town administrator, I don't think we need to do that.
Right.
So I wanted to kind of regroup anyway after the election, and hopefully we'll have a full board, 5 members, and we'll be able to look at where do we need to have a liaisons. So I'm fine with you doing it until, we regroup after the
I
election.
think we're looking at, the end of May?
That's
And
fine.
that's the assumption
So
we
I'll
get.
make a motion then to have you be appointed as a liaison, and Jim, you want to go back to assessors?
Yeah, I guess we could address that one right after. If you
Okay,
wanna
yeah.
stay, that's fine, but we'll talk
No, that's
about
fine, it doesn't work in terms of the
Do I hear a
time
vote
anyway.
To put me as liaison for the Board of Health for at
Yeah,
least?
until the
Yeah.
board reorganizes.
She made the motion, second.
I haven't heard a second.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
it. Aye.
Okay, so that's unanimous. Now, the assessor's office.
If you wanna stay there, that's fine. If you want me to step in, that's whatever works.
I'd rather you step in only because it's a brand-new board. All the assessors are new, and that you were the original liaison, so I'm fine with that continuing. If you're able to do that now that the TIF is done.
I believe there's no conflict, so I would
Okay.
have no problem.
All right, I'll make a motion then for you to be the liaison to the assessors again.
Wait a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's done too.
Ed, is it possible that you can just relist of all our assignments, because they go back and forth? It'd be nice to know where we stand.
Is there
fire.
But I'm doing those with the EMD stuff too.
Oh.
That's the problem. Right
Okay,
now,
just throwing that out there.
you saw the SEMP plan that I sent out, which is the emergency plan for the entire town. That encompasses all the town departments. And now what I'm doing is putting together a database for all those departments so that we can submit all this to the Commonwealth. You're going to see in our agenda next month, the approval of the SEMP plan. You've got a draft electronically a couple of days ago.
Mhm.
This is normal business on the emergency side, but it's putting me in a situation of talking to all these departments more than normal.
I'm just saying that I don't know that we need to have liaisons typically to departments when we have department head in a town administrator.
Right.
So in the future, I think that we should maybe have a list of all the committees and decide, I mean, I don't think that the almoners need to have a liaison. So to look at what committees make sense to have a select board liaison and regroup after the election.
Well, even right now, I mean, part of the job description we wrote for the TA was to have the departments report up, and to have a select board liaison,
It's awkward.
awkward and it's conflicting.
Yeah, and
So
realistically, I look at the liaison to be for the different boards and committees.
Right.
Right, me
Not for
too.
the departments.
So maybe we can get that list, and next meeting, we could call out what we really don't need to be at, and that Ed's
Yeah.
taken over.
Make that call now, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So next meeting,
Yeah.
Sure.
that's fine.
And I'd also like to know which of the committees liaisons have a voting role. I know PQB does, but I'm not sure about other committees. So if that can be part of the discussion too, that would be helpful.
The only one I know of is CPC. I don't know of any others that have a vote.
PQB.
Oh, PQB as well, so that's two, okay.
Okay. Now I'm going to circle back. Ed, there was a couple of things we did while you were away. Next is Selectmen's report. Does any of the Board of Selectmen have any reports, updates on anything?
I attended the planning board meeting last night, and there's no model bylaw for the marijuana yet. We're waiting for that to come out so we can address that issue, that we put the moratorium in place so that we could come up with the bylaw. We had a representative, Larry Smith from Pioneer Valley Planning, to go over the rezoning of the town, zoning bylaws. And he did mention that there will be no use facilities, if I heard him right. There'll be, I believe, grow, process, and sell, but no use at this time. I think that's what the state committee decided. So I'm not 100% positive on that, but it's just a little bit of information that he gave us. But we'll pass it along when we get more information. We're going to hold our public hearing.
Okay. Anyone else?
The liaison committee meetings I've attended, the Board of Health and Conservation and local school committee are all budgetary issues, so I'll just bring it up when we get to the budget.
John, all set?
All set?
Okay. Town Administrator's report.
First of all, would just like to confirm that we did receive the contract from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Public Safety and Security for the $60,000 to purchase the emergency generator for Town Hall. That contract has been signed by Chairman Kinnicky on behalf of the town, has been returned to the state for release of the funding. The voluntary recognition notices for the Police Officers Union and the Dispatchers Union, to be represented by the New England Police Benevolent Association, have been posted with the town clerk. There were no objections raised by the current representative to these two unions, so this will save the step of having a hearing to certify the new representation with the Department of Labor Relations. The requests for quotes for the appraisal services for the easements on the Glendale Road project are out and were advertised on Combis, the state procurement website. They are due back to the town next week. We've already received one response, and I am anticipating at least one other response before they are due back. We have received response and clarification to the Select Board questions concerning sending letters to Chapter 61 property owners from KP Law. I will read it here. If the town knows only that property in chapter lands is on the market, the right of first refusal, should it ever exist, would not have been ripened yet. Because there is no agreement with a third party for the seller to provide the town which would give rise to the town's right to acquire the property on the same terms and conditions. The town could, however, at this time, write a letter to the seller and remind the seller of its obligation to give notice to the town of a sale when there will be a conversion of the property to a residential, industrial, or commercial use. This is a different scenario than the one we have been discussing, which is the situation where the town knows there is a purchase and sale agreement, does not know what it says, and whether the town has a right to request a copy of the agreement. In this case, as I noted earlier, the town may request a copy of the agreement from the seller, but it is likely and perhaps justified that the seller will decline to provide the agreement if there is no intent to convert. In sum, the town may, 1, remind property owners of their obligations to notify the town of a sale conversion when property is on the market, and 2, request copies of agreements once it is known to exist. In the former case, I would not anticipate any response unless and until there is an agreement that contemplates a conversion. In the latter case, I would anticipate resistance. Question number 1. You have asked if the town may send requests for underlying purchase and sale agreements whenever it learns that a disposition involving chapter lands is contemplated. There is nothing that prohibits the town from doing so. Absent evidence, however, that there is an intent to convert property, it is my opinion that the town does not have the right to obtain a copy of each and every agreement for conveyance of chapter lands. The seller may accordingly, in my opinion, if there is no present intent to convert, justifiably decline to produce the document. Question number 2. You have advised that in a case where a property has already been conveyed, your question is if the town forwards a request for the agreement underlying the transaction, should it be sent to the seller or the buyer? The obligation to provide the town with notice is with the seller. Since, however, the property has already been conveyed, I recommend asking for a copy from both the seller and the buyer. In the request, the town should state the basis for its understanding that the purchaser intended to convert the land to another purpose at the time of the sale. I have received notice that the Daily Hampshire Gazette has selected Erin Kuchar as the 2018 Person of the Year. She is president of the advisory board at the Big Brothers Big Sisters of Hampshire County and on the Norris School Committee in Southampton, as well as many other roles in our community. Congratulations to Erin. Erin will be honored at a reception on April 25th from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Hadley Farms Meeting House in Hadley, Mass. The Gazette has asked for a representative from the town to attend the event and honor Ms. Kuchar with a citation. The Select Board has received an open meeting law violation complaint for the March 6, 2018 meeting from Barbara LaFlamme. And lastly, Velda Goldberg, who was the town administrative assistant, will be leaving and moving out of state at the end of April. Very sad news. It's been a pleasure working with her. She'll be moving to a warmer climate to Georgia. Upcoming, the next Board of Selectmen's meeting will be Wednesday, April 4th. The May Select Board meeting dates are yet to be determined, and department heads meeting will be Monday, March 26th at 10 a.m.
Thank you, Ed.
You're welcome.
Okay, with that, I guess we're going into new business.
Before we do that, want to react to one of his questions about Erin Kuchar?
Sure.
Get a representative? I think we should figure that out.
Okay. And are we going to acknowledge her, give her a letter of appreciation?
I think she does a lot. Obviously, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and on the school committee, we've seen her a lot, so.
She's the chair of the local school committee.
Right, the Norris School Committee, yeah. I would be in favor of that.
I would ordinarily offer to attend since I'm the liaison of the local school committee, but I'll be at a conference in Washington, D.C.
And I work right up there, but I'm on vacation that week out of town, so we're looking to the left.
What Stay on.
April
The
25th.
25th, which is a Wednesday.
Yeah. Yeah, we're both right down the road, you know.
I know.
April 25th.
Well, it looks like the retired guy could go. Would Ed like to go with me?
Certainly.
You would like to?
I might be able to, I think I'm looking at that.
Oh, if there's enough
Maybe we
room.
can carpool.
We can carpool, yeah, very good. Do we
Thank
need
you.
a driver?
And also, if we could send a letter, do you need a motion to send a letter, or,
Yeah, I'll
Yes.
second that.
okay. A congratulations letter?
We should send a
A
letter.
citation and congratulations, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I think that's a nice honor.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ed, would you draft a letter, please?
I will.
Okay. And would you let the Gazette know that myself, Mr. Labrie, and yourself will be attending?
I will do that. We'll do that.
How do folks feel about the other item that was raised, that Ed mentioned, about sending a letter to the seller, reminding the seller of the obligation to give notice to the town for a sale when there will be a conversion of the property to residential, industrial, commercial use?
And you talking about any specific one?
The two properties that currently,
So Glendale and
Fulmer.
Former? Yep. I don't see any reason not to.
I mean, it's certainly implied from our attorney that that was within the ability of us to do.
Yeah, I mean, we can notify them of the obligations and also on the ones that have a P&S that we'd like to get a copy of it.
I wasn't clear that that was part of all right. I didn't get the impression that that was okay to do.
The purchase and sale?
What is it?
Yeah, that's right, question 1. And it says there's nothing that prohibits the town from doing so.
Well, I read that differently. It said absent evidence. In other words, we don't have evidence, shovel in the ground, that there is an intent to convert the property. It's my opinion that the town does not have the right to obtain a copy of each and every agreement for the conveyance of chapter lands. So I read it a little differently.
Well, no, I think you're reading after, you asked if the town may send requests for underlying P&S agreements when it learns that a disposition involving chapter lands is contemplated. There's nothing that prohibits the town from doing so. What you read, absent evidence, goes on, the seller doesn't have to give us one, but it doesn't mean we can't ask for it, and the seller may very well give it to us. Kind of, if we don't ask, we don't get.
Okay.
Because it says the seller may accordingly, if there is no present intent, justify decline. And the one that is on Glendale, I think there's evidence,
Okay.
because of the planning board presentation.
Okay. So, did you already, is that a motion that you made then? Or we kind of did together?
We're just talking it.
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to make a motion that we send letters out to remind property owners in these two particular areas that we send out a request for a copy of the purchase and sale.
And
Again,
remind them of their obligation.
yeah, that was my first part, yeah.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Is this not the same property owner?
It is the same.
Yeah,
So
so
we're talking
two
one
separate
letter.
properties. Well, we can combine them if you want, or I don't know if we have to have two separate ones, but two separate sales, so.
So just so I understand, you want to send a letter to the seller that if there was a plan for a conversion, that we were supposed to be notified of this.
Right, to have first right of refusal.
Right.
And secondly, if there's a purchase and sale on it, we're requesting a copy
of
from the
purchase and
seller.
sale.
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I don't have a problem with that letter.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I can vote on this because it's nothing to do, it's talking about Glendale Road, it's talking about Fulmer Road.
Yep.
And if they want to send a letter, I don't have a problem sending a letter.
Yeah.
So I'll vote on it.
and I guess I just want to differentiate in general, because we're talking about chapter land a lot. The people that are buying the chapter land, I think they're doing everything legitimately to buy it and put projects on it. So I want to make sure that people out there, we're not going against the buyers, because they're contractors, they're doing what they do, and they're doing it properly. We just want to exercise our right, if at all possible, to bring the land into the town.
That was unanimous. Anything else? All right, then I'm going to move this into new business. Oh, thank you for bringing me back on the errand thing, because,
Oh, yeah, we don't want to miss that opportunity,
yeah, no,
yeah.
it was like, I was looking at the next thing that's coming up, and that was getting my attention, because I was kind of surprised. We have a resignation letter from Donna Whiteley, our town treasurer collector. She's moving on to another position in another community, and we basically have a letter from her stepping down. So if we don't take this letter,
She can't leave. I vote we don't accept it then. No, we can't do anything, obviously.
you want to send her a nice thank you letter acknowledging her work?
Yeah, I think she's done a great job, so.
I'm actually enjoying Ed. This is kind of nice.
I
I
think
think I've already filled up my
just
Saturday with
publicly
just
we
writing
should
letters
thank
here.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we regretfully accept her resignation.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
And that we send her a letter thanking her.
Yeah, she's done a great job over the years, so if you're listening, Donna, we're going to miss you, but we understand.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Shirley, can I just back up one? I just thought it might be a good time to mention, because I don't know, we wouldn't be going back to it, that there is a public forum planned to discuss and to clarify issues relative to the chapter lands and such, and it's scheduled for April 5th at Norris School at 6 o'clock. It's a Thursday.
Thursday.
Are you putting that under upcoming or new business? Where is that going?
I wasn't sure, if there wasn't really anything on the announcement
not
there,
on
so
the
I just,
agenda here.
maybe calendar announcements, maybe that's,
Okay.
it's okay to add that?
I'd put it on the calendar and announcements
Okay.
that way, and that's where I'd put it.
Okay. It is on the town calendar. Oh, it's not on the calendar? Okay.
It's on the website.
Now, we're losing our treasurer, which means we need to do a posting.
And collector.
And collector. So posting and appointing an interim town treasurer collector is going to be necessary. Does this board want to take a vote to instruct the town administrator to post that position?
Absolutely.
Now, do we have a job description? Because it's an elected position.
There is a job description. It's been approved.
Current one?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
So is someone going to make a motion?
I'll
Make a motion that we go ahead and post an interim treasurer and tax collector position.
I'll second.
Discussion? Short window here on this appointment?
Short window, number one, it'll be an emergency appointment, so it'll fill the time from appointed up until the time of the May 15th election. And then whoever is elected at the May 15th election will become the permanent collector treasurer.
Can I ask one question now? Does the temporary have to be a resident of Southampton? Just asking.
Good question.
No.
I think that's part of the job description.
I know the elected does, but I didn't know
Yeah.
about
I don't believe so.
Yeah, because you're elected, you have to be.
No.
Right.
Elected has to, yes, I was just curious about the.
But if a temporary emergency appointment is made, the job description doesn't say has to be a resident.
Okay, just asking.
And now that we've got some PQB folks here, is this a good time to revisit the job description and grade it so that when the election comes up, we
All
have
right,
a,
you'll have to go there, to the podium.
yeah, if you don't mind, Art. Because I don't think we've ever done that.
We haven't done that yet, but the reason the holdup is that we sent it in to you folks, but you said you couldn't touch it because it's an elected position. So I don't know what the legalities are around this. We certainly can score it and come up with a amount of money, a salary for the position, but we haven't done that yet. We have approved the job description.
So with that in mind, if we find out that we can do it and we get it to the PQB in a reasonable time, you folks can do that?
Yeah, we will certainly do it at the next meeting.
Okay.
And this is Art Lawrence, he's chair of the PQB board.
Right.
Crooked Ledge Road.
113 Crooked Ledge Road, sorry. But yeah,
I just don't know the number.
yeah, 113. We will definitely put it on the next meeting.
So-
And if we have to, we could also have an emergency meeting if you feel we need to do that.
So another question, and I think the answer is going to be no, but can we put criteria in the job description for an elected official? I don't believe so.
Well,
Can
there
we?
are right now, it says bachelor's degree. So
But
I think
can-
there are criteria, but it is elected, so it only,
That's what I mean.
I think
So
it's
can
more
we
guidelines.
hold people to
I
it?
mean,
Yeah.
it's there, and it's got the state credentials and so on and so forth, and yeah, all that's listed, but yeah, it's a good point.
I mean,
You get 2
Talked
votes.
about this in
Yeah.
the past of making this an appointed.
Well, it is one
It's
of the
on the-
possible warrant
on
questions.
the warrant.
It's on the warrant, okay.
And that
So-
would precede the election anyway.
Correct.
But,
So let's put the qualifications in the job description, so if it passes at
Yeah.
the town
yeah,
meeting, we'll
that's
have
all
it.
in there, yeah.
Okay.
Ed brought up a point, because I asked the same thing of Ed, what happens because the 2 are going to sort of hit at once, right? If this is an appointed position, and at the same time, somebody gets elected. And Ed's call was that they would fill out the 2-year appointment, and then the 2-year elected part, and then you guys could appoint after that. I believe that's what you said, Ed?
The election will be for a 2-year term, which will fill out what Donna's original term was.
That's either
And-
way, right?
Yeah, and in my opinion, basically, if this were to pass at the town meeting and at the election to change it to an appointed position, that the individual who was elected on May 15th would serve that 2-year term, and then at the end of that 2-year term, the position would become appointed rather than elected.
I mean, we could get that clarified if we get to that end, but also, could we get clarified, if time comes, if that person can be put into the appointed position and just negate the elected part?
Would that be too close? I mean, the election is the first, and the town meeting is the first.
The election is going to trump, no pun intended, the town meeting, because the town meeting bylaw change needs approval from the Attorney General's
Okay,
office.
all right.
That's going to take a number of months.
Okay. But let's get the work done. Yeah. Thanks, Art.
You're welcome. And I will say that actually Donna does have a recommendation for an individual to fill that interim position. The individual worked in our collector treasurer's office previously. I have spoken with the 2 ladies in the collector treasurer's office of how they felt about, number 1, having an interim in there, and number 2, about this particular individual. Neither one, both of them seem to prefer having an interim in there because they're both relatively new, and if this individual that Donna has recommended were the successful and appointed as the interim, both feel that they can work with her just fine.
So you're going to have to post it, though?
Yeah, I still will have to post it, yes, and interview.
And is this person a town resident? I'm just curious, that answers my question.
Yes, this particular individual is a town resident.
Perfect.
So this interim position will go up until the election, because there will be a vote on this current election for a treasurer.
So we're basically looking at about a 6-week period.
Can I ask you a question? Is there time to put that position on the ballot?
It's already on,
Deadline's coming up pretty soon.
It already is. It is already on.
Oh, it is already.
Yeah, the question's on there.
Up for
Yeah.
No,
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 no.
she had
Oh.
actually given the town clerk the heads up. If you might remember back to our last meeting, we actually had an item on the agenda for the election warrant, and we pulled it off.
Okay, okay.
As I remember, she was in favor of going to an appointed position, so.
So we have, and I've lost track and I'm asking you, we have a motion and a second. Did we vote to authorize the town administrator to post a position? All right,
I have it, yes, the unanimous.
so the only other question I have is, what do you think the turnaround, 2 weeks? So let's be timed out so that we can appoint this person at our next selectmen's meeting?
How long do you have to post it for, Ed? 2 weeks?
It's an emergency.
It's an emergency. It doesn't have
Okay.
to be up that long. So I would hope to be able to turn it around by, get it posted, interview, probably the beginning of the following week.
All right, so for our next meeting, we should have this. Okay, very good. All right, next issue.
I have somebody
Yeah,
podium.
I've
But
been
it's not
standing
open
here.
time.
Oh, okay, I just didn't know if you knew. I'm
Not
sorry.
related to this question, okay.
The next one is the Southampton Firefighters Association letter of intent to acquire as surplus property, the 1972 Maxim fire truck with the town has declared as excess property. That happened about a year ago, I guess. That's been sitting in the Cleveland Road Fire Station now for at least a year. And the association basically wants it. They're willing to pay us $1. No one else has come forward looking for it. I believe the fire chief tried to sell it. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone.
Well,
I guess we can just,
Well, is the Firefighters Association a not-for-profit organization, 501c3? Okay. And I don't know that the chief's advertised it anywhere. I don't know who would want it, but,
Well, it was something we signed
yeah.
quite a few months back, putting it out, that and a lot of other equipment.
right, but was it,
People bid on it, and then they opened, they got no response.
where was it advertised?
We signed, well, I don't know.
I
where
know
was
it's
advertised.
posted on the town website, so I suspect that, I mean, frankly, I didn't follow up on it because we were trying to get surplus property out of here.
Yeah, fire,
Most of it is,
fire truck's a big piece of property.
I.
The rest of it was just junk stuff, yeah.
That's right, it was junk stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I know at least for the state, we advertise it on a municipal site and money goes back to the town. That's my other concern. If it's worth $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, it should go back to the town, you know? Not that I don't want the association to get it, but I just want to make sure we maximize, pun intended, the value on this.
What do you think, Ed?
I was not around. I do, I can't verify if it was or was not posted for bids or auction or what have you. If it was and there was no bids on it, yeah, and someone can walk in off the street and offer the town X amount of dollars and you can sell it. If it did not go through that process, then it probably.
Table this to the next meeting?
Well, I guess even if it did, is there value in the fire truck, and what is the value? Because again, a couple $1,000s to a department is a lot of money nowadays, and it's our town money. So again, it's not against the Firefighters Association, but we've got to look at every angle to maximize the money as we can. If it's $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 that the school gets, or the fire department gets, or police department gets, I think it's worth trying it.
Does it run? I'm just curious.
It's 1972.
Yeah, it's an antique. Oh, I'm talking about the fire truck.
Charlie was around when it was brand new.
I was too.
You weren't driving it.
Yes.
Well, I mean, realistically, I guess you could go to a scrapper and find out what they give you for junk. I mean, there's
Well,
metal value in that.
There's a website, municipbid.com, that you put it on there, It doesn't cost you anything. The
There's
buyer,
that, there's Gov Deals is another one.
what?
Gov Deals is
Yeah,
another one.
Gov Deals is another one, and the buyer pays a percentage premium when they buy it, but it doesn't cost the town. And where I am, we auction off probably 100 items a year. We got 45 vehicles going up, and they go. People buy them either for the scrap or to restore them or to do whatever. You know, if we were flushing money, I probably wouldn't bother, but we're not.
Well, do we try that first, and if we get a response, give the fire association right of first refusal, or is that?
Well, you can't let them bid on it on the website.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, do I hear a motion to instruct the town administrator to put this out to bid?
I'll make the motion.
Out to auction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I agree. Let it go out there.
Yeah.
All right, and we'll try to circle back with this in a couple of weeks. Ed, you'll tell the fire chief?
Yes, I will.
Thank you, sir. Speaking of fire chief, we have a fire chief disclosure of conflict of interest. 19, request for select board approval.
Would you like me to summarize?
Yes, would you please?
Certainly. The chief's wife would like to join the fire department, and the chief has been recommended by the state to, because of the direct reporting and the hiring, that he should not be involved in the hiring process, number one. So if the Board of Selectmen were so willing, either they could appoint the chief's wife, or the select board could instruct me to be the appointing authority in this particular case. That's number one. And one way or the other on those two, I would suggest that one of those two avenues is taken. The other piece of the puzzle is the state ethics have also reminded the chief that even if the board or I appointed his wife, that there's still direct supervision as far as scheduling, supervisory duties, pay. The board could so direct that someone else in the department take care of those duties in this particular case, or would probably be my recommendation, because this is not uncommon throughout, fire departments, and in some case police departments, that it becomes a family tradition. My recommendation would be that either the select board or myself act as the appointing authority, and then after that, the chief be given the ability to take care of the everyday aspects of the supervision.
I don't think it's uncommon at all. I think a lot of firefighters run in families, as does police, and I'm totally fine with you being the appointing authority. The only part that bothers me a little bit is that the supervision, I don't think, should be by the fire chief. I think day-to-day payroll, scheduling, yes, but I think supervisor should probably be somebody else.
It says right here, in most cases, that direct supervision would be under an officer or senior firefighter,
Yeah,
Deputy fire chief.
but there is an occasion that he would be the.
right. I mean, for day-to-day and scheduling and payroll, yes, but I think as far as being someone's supervisor, isn't it typical that it would be somebody else that's in a leadership position besides the chief?
It's possible, but on the not everyday aspect of an actual fire or whatever, the chief might actually have some supervisory duties, depending on who's there and who's assigned or
Right.
who's working. But on every day, yes.
I'm just suggesting that it not be him.
No, he's a command in a fire, and
Right,
he
right, right.
knows the conditions that may arise.
Right.
But every day, I think he has a fill in for that.
Yeah, even in scheduling, he has somebody that does the scheduling.
Yes, he does.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of what they do on other fire departments, but it does give you concern, but, you know, as long as she's paid the same as everybody, her same level, you know, the raises, the certification, if everything's the same, and I don't see an issue with it.
Need a motion?
Well, I'm just wondering what Jim has to say, but,
No, I'm good with that, Ally.
okay.
I think having Ed be the appointing authority, and then the deputy chief or the other officer looking at us.
Yep.
That sounds good.
So you making that motion?
I'll make that motion. I'll make a motion to accept the disclosure.
I'll second that.
Could you read back the motion, please?
To accept the disclosure.
To accept the disclosure and to appoint Ed as the appointing authority. Any other parts to this, like the day-to-day and everything else is going to be assigned to another firefighter?
Well, I think part of it is he's got to adhere to the recommendations of the State Ethics
Yeah.
Commission.
Then that part will be moot. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's moved.
Have him sign that, please.
You gotta sign this now?
Yes, please.
You got the hammer.
Okay, the next one is the town notification of volunteer recognition. You did this in your report.
Did that in my report, yes.
Well, that's done. And now, 2019 budget and override discussion.
And before we get into that, would the Select Board like to determine the cutoff for the submission of warrant articles for the annual town meeting to the town?
What is, town meeting is May 1st. We need 30 days. So that's April 1st.
Yeah, which is Sunday, but,
So you need them next week, and you need to post a meeting for next week.
so the last workday looks like it's March 29th, which is a Thursday.
How about all articles have to be submitted by March 28th, Wednesday? And on the 29th, the select board has a meeting that Thursday.
Sounds like fun.
I'm good with that. You good with that?
Fine with me?
All right. And that meeting is solely for the warrant.
So you want a motion on that?
Why not?
I'll make a motion. We have until the 28th of March 2018 to submit articles for the warrant.
Yeah, how about end of business day, just to clarify?
End of business day.
End of business day. And then on the 29th, the Board of Selectmen will meet at
What time?
4 o'clock.
I think not.
I'm retired, I can do this 4 o'clock thing.
Yes, you can.
Somebody will second that motion.
Yeah, do I hear a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now, Selectmen's meeting, 6 o'clock on Thursday.
Sounds good.
All in favor?
We said that already.
6 o'clock.
On Thursday.
Yep. All right.
Got it.
That'll. And that'll allow it to be posted on Friday. correct? If the select board votes on it Thursday night, it has to be posted Friday to be in that window of 30 days before town meeting.
Well, town hall is closed on the Friday.
Well, we can post it outside and put it on our website.
We could.
I'm asking.
We have another notice to that, Carol.
I had a long talk with Virginia, and look at how things worked out this week.
That's down to the wire, but.
That's what I'm getting at, unless you want to have the selectmen's meeting on the 28th.
And then move it to the 27th on the submittal?
Yeah,
You want one buffer day, I would think.
so, okay, then
Yeah.
let's reopen this up. The last day of submittal for articles is the 27th.
I'll amend my motion to the 27th, how's that?
Okay.
You
And
want a second?
I'll second, amend my second.
Any discussion? All in favor, 27th,
Aye.
Aye.
the end of business day.
And
And
our,
on the 28th, we'll have the select board's meeting.
And then,
It's a Wednesday night.
do we want to do it at 5 o'clock, give it a little time? Can everybody make it, or?
5 o'clock will work that day. I actually prefer it.
Now,
Oh.
now, before you go too far, you're not confusing with posting the submittals with the actual date that the annual town meeting warrant needs to be signed and posted, are you?
The annual town meeting warrant needs to be signed 30 days.
No,
No?
no. That, I'm talking just the submittals of the cutoffs.
All right, the submittals have to be submitted by the 28th. All right, 27th.
Right.
The warrant itself needs to be signed and posted by April, no, I won't be able to find it.
7 days before.
7 days before.
On Wednesday, okay.
Yes, that date is April 23rd, 1 week prior, 7 days prior.
Is it bad for you, or?
No, I think we'll get back.
So, well, I don't have a problem with the submittal of the articles on Tuesday, but I don't think we need a selectmen's meeting because we can do it on the 4th.
Right, and if that's the case, you could actually have the submittals later in the week.
Right,
Yeah.
so we can have the submittals to the 20, the Thursday, whatever date that is.
That'd be the 29th.
29th, you want to go for the 3rd, is a charm.
So this is when we start doing it on the 29th?
So I will amend for the 3rd,
The third
third
time,
try, I will amend the motion to have the submittals no later than end of business day on the 29th, which is Thursday.
Okay.
And I'm amending my second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Very good. And I'm sure I don't want the 30th to end.
So
We
when
will-
is the select board meeting?
It's the 4th of April.
It's the
Oh,
4th.
so we don't have to have an extra one?
Right,
Right.
that's the nice part of this. All right,
And we're working on your budget.
all right. Does the board want to take a 5-minute recess and stretch before we get into the budget? Because I know we get into that budget, we're going to be getting into that budget.
Sounds like a good idea.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Okay, then I'm calling a 5-minute recess. We'll be back at 7 o'clock.
See our friend?
Okay, I'm opening up the meeting now. It's March 22nd, Board of Selectmen. It is now 7 o'clock. We had a 5-minute recess. Again, this is being recorded and televised. Our next agenda item is the 2019 budget and override discussion. As most of us have seen the preliminary, this is going to be devastating to our community. I understand Regional School had an update, but I guess she's not here.
She just stepped out, but she had it.
Okay, Ed, you want to start this?
Sure. And there are a few of the large overall budgets, and there are a bunch of the summary scenarios up here.
We should have
would like them. You have two documents in front of you. One is the line item detail of the budget and some of the different, what was approved in fiscal year 18, what was actually requested in fiscal year 19, and what a level service budget might be that Vicki and I worked on. And then you have the single sheet, which takes some of those scenarios and works off them. There are basically 5 columns to it. What was approved through the fiscal year 2018 budget process, what the actual fiscal year 2019 budget requests have been, what Vicki and I looked at and said, okay, from the requests that came in, what would be actually the level service, which was the instructions which were sent out with the budget process of basically the only things that were supposed to be requested to be increased were those things that would be increased under contractual obligations, whether that be a service contract, a collective bargaining agreement, increase to heating fuel, what have you. The fourth column is actually, we'll work off that third column, and it's what I have developed as a possible budget to include for requesting an override. Currently, that is in the area of $550,000, and then the last column off to the right are some of the scenarios of what may happen if the override does not pass. And first of all, I will say that these are my ideas, my thought processes. The Board of Selectmen has not weighed in on this at any point in time to this point. They're my ideas, and I'm looking for direction from the Board of Selectmen as to whether they concur with some of these ideas, whether they think some of the things that I have put down here are off the table and I should go in another direction, what have you. And I actually will say that I know that on some of these, the Finance Committee may agree with some of my ideas, and then on some of the other ones, I will say that they are even tougher than I am, even in the budget for the override. And you know, some of the examples, I will speak for them this evening. They felt that even in the override portion of the budget, that we should go back and fund the positions, shall I say, pre-special town meeting. So, you know, anyone that had any hours or a contractual salary increase that was approved at the special town meeting, that should not be considered as what the level service or what they were making for fiscal year 18. One of the things that I have in the override budget column is currently we have a shared conservation agent which is paid through a grant with Easthampton. That grant will come to the end on June 30th. I have that position in here to be funded through the override budget. The cost to convert that over is about $10,000. I know the Finance Committee believes that that position should be taken out even at the override of the override budget. So from there, I'll just summarize the actual, and we have about $285,000 in new revenues, which will be available to us for fiscal year 2019. When the request came in, the deficit of the requests over what the actual revenues would be was actually $805,000. Vicki took that number and went back and looked at, okay, what might a level service budget be rather than funding all the requests. At that point, the deficit was $621,000. I took those numbers and said, if we're going to actually sell this to the voters and taxpayers, I thought we really needed to take a look at what we're doing and what we're providing. And I've got some reductions over the level service budget that would take us to what I call an override budget, which would still be a request of a Proposition 2.5 override of the neighborhood of $550,000. Some of those assumptions to get to that override budget number were that there would be no new positions on the municipal side from fiscal year 2018 approved budgets, that no additional hours would be added to positions on the municipal side over what was approved in the fiscal year 2018 approved budgets, that no hourly pay increases other than collective bargaining agreement step increases on the municipal side from fiscal year 2018 approved budgets. Now, those changes basically amount to, number one, we had previously talked about a 2% COLA for non-union employees because we kind of assumed that the collective bargaining agreements, which are all due to expire on June 30th, would probably be around 2%. My first assumption was that no 2% COLAs would be offered to non-union employees. That's roughly a reduction of about $32,000. Number two, that no 2% COLA would be offered to the union employees for the first year of a new collective bargaining agreement, which would be fiscal year 2019. My estimate on that is a savings of about $32,000. The level service budget as originally put out actually did not have a reserve fund amount in it. That current reserve fund amount is $5,000. It was sitting with $0 in it, even at the override level. I believe that things could happen that might not be able to be covered by some of the budgets, that these things would be unforeseen. Could be that a furnace or boiler in one of the buildings breaks down and needs repair, HVAC work, what have you. So I did add back $5,000 into the reserve fund, which would bring us back actually to a level funded point to where we currently are. The assessors have two needs because, number one, their software program, which is Vision, that they utilize is changing their base from Oracle. They are going to be required to upgrade to a new software platform, which is a cost of about $15,000, which should be seen on the capital side of the requests. One of the other pieces of the puzzle is their software program is not compatible with our current server. So they had put in a request for $6,000 to go to a cloud-based system and backup system. That $6,000 is a ongoing recurring yearly cost. We're about 1 year away anyway from having to replace our current server, so my suggestion in this area would be, rather than paying $6,000 a year going forward, to get away from the non-compatibility is that we replace our server 1 year early, which would have a cost of about $7,500. That server should last us for about 5 years before it would need to be replaced again. So to me, that would be a more efficient use of taxpayer funds. But to reduce that $6,000, we'd also have to purchase and install a new server for $7,500 on the capital side. We had requested that the legal services go from actually the annual town meeting had approved legal services at $25,000. $10,000 was added to that at the special town meeting. We went back and looked at a 3 to 4 year average of what the town had spent in legal services. That had balanced out to about an average of $40,000 a year. That was the original request. I'm suggesting that in the override budget that we actually reduce it by $10,000 down to $30,000. I did add in the conservation agent for $10,000 into this budget scenario. At the annual town meeting, the appropriation for the annual town reports was cut from $5,000 to $500. The original request was to go back to $1,000. I've taken $500 back out and said, let's just level fund that at the $500 level. The police had requested an increase to their police department expense account due to having to purchase snow tires and some other items. They had actually requested an increase of $6,000. I have cut that in half and made a reduction of $3,000 to that line item. That's a rough rounded total of about $69,000 in additional cuts to get from the $621,000 to the $552,000 level. That would be my recommendation for going forward for an override request. Any questions, thoughts, other ideas?
It's depressing.
Hey, Ed, can you walk it back a little and go back to the first page on the columns? I just want to make sure I'm saying this right.
What's that, John?
If you can go back to the cover page, I just want to make sure I'm looking at this right.
Sure.
Now, the fiscal 19 level service column, which is the fourth one over, if you go down on page 4, where the totals are you saying there would be a deficit of 621,000 if we do level service?
If we did the level service that Vicki had looked at, yes.
Okay. So to the left of it, one column, which is the fiscal, actually go 2 columns to the left, fiscal 19 request is 805,000. So the difference between what the departments are requesting versus level service is the difference? 184,000?
Correct.
Okay.
So the requests were $184,000 more than what?
And this does this include Hampshire Regional?
Yes.
This presumes the towns will approve the budget of Hampshire, correct?
This would have, yes, assumed that the towns approved the Hampshire regional budget at what was voted on and would approve the Norris School budget on what we were given for a figure which would be level service. It would not include the additional math counselor that they were looking for.
So it also includes no cost of living for non-union employees and the no 2% for the union employees. Those are just the employees outside the school, not, okay. So in the union contract for the school, and Erin's here, she could tell us, is there a 2% built into that for a COLA?
We haven't negotiated
Is it,
or the property, or.
Aaron, I gotta bring it to the
yeah, I'm
podium.
sorry, my fault.
We are in contract negotiations. I don't believe 2% was put in there. I'd have to get what the number is. There was no intention of a 2%, I don't believe, but I'd have to get that from Bobby.
Okay, because I can't see giving the school 2% and telling everybody else they can't. It's got to be all or nothing, like
Agreed.
you've said before, yeah?
Yep, agreed.
Okay,
What about Hampshire too? It's less than two, it's in the contract.
but there's something in there. And again, we're stuck depending on how the vote goes. Which, Ed, reminds me, we talked about getting together with the other 4 towns, the select board, to discuss the budget. Have we done anything with that?
There was some interest from Goshen, and I know that actually one of the West Hampton members of their Board of Selectmen were going to reach out to one of the members of our select board, and I can follow up on
Yeah,
that.
if you can, because it's getting close.
Yeah.
And we can meet wherever they want to meet, as far as I'm concerned. Because that's a critical juncture.
I had a couple of questions. I was asking the same question as John. So we have the ability, even though we might not like it, we have the ability, though, to not have COLA raises for union employees.
Currently, all 3 of our union contracts expire on June 30th, which means that fiscal year 19 has not been negotiated at this point in time. Therefore, we can put 0 out there. They might not like that and where the bargaining goes, but I feel that at least if we are not giving 2% to our non-union employees, and we are in a year that we are trying to make all, shall we say, be as prudent as possible with our taxpayer dollars, that to go and say with the unions is that, look, we look for, $550,000 in override funds just to get where we are with no cost of living increases, that, hopefully that will be negotiated for the first year of that CBA, and what year 2 and year 3 means, I don't know. However, conversely, if we said, okay, whether it's a 2% or 1% to the non-union employees, that's a flag that those unions have a real good rationale of asking and receiving that same amount.
Mhm.
The other, I just have a couple other things. I totally support a 3rd shift for the fire department, the ambulance service. And I know that it is included in the override budget, but it would be threatened if the override didn't pass.
Absolutely.
So are there...
Before you go there, can I ask, because I got a question too. That was voted on at the town meeting that we establish it. How can we eliminate it?
Town meeting vote to set the budget.
Right, but if they say that we got to have the service, can we eliminate it without going back? Because they've said that they want it.
We are going back, we're going to town meeting.
Yeah. So they'll have to vote to eliminate it.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So are there any ambulance receipts that would offset this amount, or does that include ambulance receipts?
This includes ambulance receipts, and this is the hard part of the whole puzzle and why we were at the special town meeting, is the DOR does not allow us to forecast that we're going to have whether it's $100,000 or $125,000 in receipts from the ambulance during fiscal year 2019, like we forecast our other fees or licenses or what have you. You can only appropriate what you have at the time. Currently, right now, there are $65,000 in ambulance receipts available right now. Now you still got April, May, and June to come. Vicky's original forecast, and I think she was pretty right on, was that we should have $100,000 available to utilize when we went to town meeting and the budget became in effect on July 1st. we were both kind of hoping that those receipts might be accelerated a little, and we might have, might be, oh, it looks like we're going to have 110 or 20. You could appropriate those. Now, that's all you can appropriate. You're going to actually have receipts come in July, August, September, October, November, December. Theoretically, if you had a town meeting in November, December, January, you can now reappropriate those ambulance receipts that have come in beforehand.
Okay, but the 32,000 would be the obligation of the town apart from that, right?
Right, exactly.
I just have two other things. You okay with my going on?
Oh, sure.
Okay. I do support a conservation agent. I know that it's something that's in there. The grant's only been in place for a year. It's 8 hours for Southampton, 11 hours for Easthampton. I've been on a lot of committees, and I've never seen a committee that has to do, I mean, there may be others that I'm not aware of, but I've never seen a committee that has to do so much out-of-committee work. And the conservation budget was eliminated entirely a couple of years ago. So I just want to say I totally support that because it may look like it's an additional thing, and why that. So I just want to give that backstory a little bit. That being said, it was a new grant that we're taking on in operations, and yet we have a senior center director who is funded out of a grant to the tune of $11,000, about $500 of her salary. It comes from a grant. So I just find it a little uncomfortable that we were funding a new position at $10,000, and we currently have a director who's the head of a major department in town that's grant funded. So I would have to say that I would support the $11,500 to come also in this override, and that will allow $11,500 of the grant to be used for the seniors, which it's actually intended to be used for. And just one other thing. John mentioned there was $184,000. That was the difference between request and level service.
Yep.
I don't really know what those things are. So, I mean, I appreciate, you know, the work in sort of whittling this down, but in the absence of not knowing what other departments had requested, I'm just wondering if we can get that information.
I can send that along. A good number, well, basically that $11,000 is a portion of it. There were a number of individuals or departments that were looking for more hours for individuals, increases to the hourly salaries of individuals. There was a new position that was requested. So that makes up a good amount of it. But I will send the spreadsheet that's got that information along to you.
You all set?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Couple questions? Okay. Getting down where it says additional municipal cuts required to get to no override. Pretty self-explanatory, third shift to ambulance. After that, it says municipal reduction of workforce for 6 employees. Those 6 employees, non-school related, so that would hurt a department wherever that may be. And my other question is, going down below that where it says if Hampshire regional budget passes, there's an additional 6 employees. Are those school employees? Is that why you're differentiating between the two?
No, and you skipped ahead one column on me. So, but you've always been a little bit ahead of me, John. I appreciate that. So, and we can always come back to the override budget, but
Okay.
Two of the constants through this are legally we are obligated to fund the Hampshire regional school budget at what was voted at, unless at least 2 member towns vote against it.
Yep.
So that has pretty much been a constant, at least out into that final column. But to have anything less than what they voted for it is a requirement of 2-member towns to vote
Right,
against it.
we've got to plug that in, and that's why we want to meet
We
with the
may.
other select board
Right.
members.
Exactly. The other constant is with the override budget, like I said, the Norris School budget that's in here is what they gave us for figures, which would be level service. They told us that their full request would also have a math counselor in it. It does not have that. That final column on the right, we have estimated that the minimum increase we would need to give to Norris School to meet net minimum school spending would be $137,000. So that's at that one.
That meets net school spending. Does that affect the personnel or anything, Aaron? Okay.
Would
I'm just trying to figure out why
Yeah.
we have 8 employee.
Yes, so if we fund at net school spending, we have to cut $250,000 from the Norris budget, which will be additional staff. We're working on that right now, on what that means, but it's $250,000. So then there's also, I would say, probably unemployment cost that goes against that too.
And I added
So-
it back in
you-
to this one when
Okay, I
you go to my
didn't-
second set.
Okay, I didn't see that, but yeah, so there's a $250,000 that we'd have to cut.
And basically, I plugged $55,000 in.
So if you had to cut 250,000 and then 55 adds to the unemployment, does that filter back in to where you need 300,000 cut in order to obtain 250
Well,
cuts?
we can't. 137 is their
Right.
bottom line
Yeah,
figure.
bottom.
So
Unless we go below net spending, we have a 5% window, but
I
we
don't.
don't want to do that.
We don't want to do that
Yeah.
because then we're going to get penalized by the state.
Yeah, right, and we've been there too many times.
So the 55,000 that comes from that will actually affect the municipal side.
So 250,000.
250
even
from
if
the
we-
Norris budget, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So-
The override budget includes, it would get it to net school and.
And we wouldn't have to cut the
You wouldn't have to cut
250,
any of it.
Full
correct.
service.
It would level
Level
service,
service.
correct, correct, yes.
So I guess my question still I have, Ed, on one of them is 6 employees up above.
Yep.
And I see where there's increase of the unemployment, which is 35. And then under, if Hampshire regional budget passes, there is another $55,000 for unemployment and a reduction of 6 employees. Where do those 12 come from? Are they spread out just in the town or part with the school? Or how'd you come up with that?
They would all be on the municipal side and not the Norris School. And then
Unless
they would
they
be,
had a cut because they didn't get level
Well-
spending. That would be a whole nother set of employees that weren't going to be there.
well, that, like I say, that's going to be within their budget. The unemployment side will come over to our budget of having to
Right. But
add and increase that. But these are just municipal side employees.
So 12, but I guess what I'm getting at, like Aaron was saying, just with meeting net school spending would mean $250,000 cut, which means staff. So not only would we lose 12 on the municipal side, we lose X amount on the Norris side.
Correct.
Have you thought of how many that would be? I mean, that's something we should plug in.
We're working on
Okay. I mean, average salary of a teacher is 65, 68,000,
I
think?
guess, we're working on it right now for Wednesday's school committee meeting. That's going to be presented, what a net school spending budget looks like. But I can't venture a guess, 4 or 5, I don't know, you
Yeah,
know.
4 at that
Yeah.
level, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I can venture a guess, I don't know, so.
Okay. Thank you. So it could be upwards of 16, 17 total. Okay.
Could be, and here's the hard part of that, because in that last column, my first assumption, and that's why you see 2 different sets of reductions down below, but if the override does not pass, it is going to be miserable, at least for Norris. It's going to be miserable for the municipal side of things. The hardest part to predict is, my assumption here is when we go to the non-override budget, my assumption is 2 of the member towns have said, we can't afford this, have voted against the Hampshire regional budget. And basically what I did is I went back and looked at probably the last 4 years the average has probably been $100,000 increase to Hampshire Regional, averaging everything out. It's been up and down, but if you just average it out. So I said, okay, they've basically asked for $300,000. I'm going to cut that by about, I'm going to cut it in half. It would still give them $150,000 roughly. But it would have been reduced their budget by, and I will say, the reduction to their budget would be bigger than 150,000, because I'm saying, but they need to come back to, with our assessment,
Right.
would be only be $150,000.
But you're talking about Hampshire,
And I'm talking about Hampshire.
and we can't do anything about it.
Well, we can.
If two towns vote against
If
it.
two
two
towns
towns.
at the annual town meeting vote
Right.
against their budget,
But all that means is it goes back
It
to
goes
the
back.
school committee to
Right.
relook at it.
right.
It
So it'd
doesn't
be more
necessarily
like-
mean there's a cut involved or a big cut or anything. They've
Well,
gotta-
except
they've
then they
gotta go
have,
back and-
except then they have to bring it back again.
And it would be $300,000 because we're 50+%.
Yeah.
So if it's 150 on us,
Yeah.
it would be a total of about 300,000 for the district.
Exactly.
Yeah, and-
But if the first set of cuts that I've got to get there, if Hampshire is still fully funded, we're going to have to make an additional $150,000. And I'm going to say this honestly, at that point in time, I think there's going to be a real divide between municipal, Norris, and Hampshire, because Hampshire will have come out of this whole.
Yeah.
Everybody else is going to feel the pain.
Well, that's
and-
the nature of the way it's always been because of the agreement.
And that's the problem we had going to the school committee. When we went to Hampshire Regional, all our representatives voted to keep it as it is because they're looking at Hampshire Regional and we're keeping everybody, whole up here and not looking at Norris or cutting Norris or the town. So, and you folks are on, you folks were there and you did what you thought was best for Hampshire Regional, but don't look at the town. How does it affect the rest of the town? By passing $300,000 for Hampshire Regional, you're killing Norris. I mean, you, the school committee, and, it's pitting one against the other. And,
It just makes it difficult to have consistent rules across the board when you say, no additional hours, no additional positions, and they're, it's mostly it's health insurance, but I think it's also coach's salary, it's a new van, it's adding adjustment counselors, so there are additional hours and there are additional, it's not level service.
and cost of living increases and all that. So it's, again, I mean, we're not picking on individuals on the board, but it pits Hampshire Regional against the others.
Margaret Larson, 9 David Street. I'm a member of the Hampshire Regional School Council and School Committee. So, Rini, in response to your concerns about the 3 additional items that appear not to be level service funding. So I have some information that I'm going to share with everybody, so I'll pass it out.
Thank you.
All right, so this this describes the 3 requests that the school committee considered the Tier 1 budget. So it's a level service plus these items that we wanted to call to your attention. So the first is to increase the line for the athletic coaches' salaries. The total for that's $33,866. So what we want to make clear in that is that does not represent any kind of increase in the number of coaches or in their salaries. In the past, that the coaches' increases, I think, passed, I don't know, for the last couple of years anyway, since before Principal Smitty got to Hampshire Regional, they were not included in the budget, in the actual salary line. So at the end of every year, there was a line item transfer in order to transfer that money to make those coaches whole.
Do you know why they weren't included in the budget?
There's, I think Over time, just some items were done certain ways, line item transfers, and that's how it has historically been done.
So
And
not
so-
good accounting practice, so.
No, so bit by bit, we're trying to make it so that we are more transparent. We always made it clear that those line item transfers took place, but in the interest of transparency, we want those where they belong up front.
So it's clarifying.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so, Principals Committee has been working on this for a couple of years with a number of things, and I think this might be the last one of those kinds of items.
So this figure doesn't represent any increase in the
No.
amount for the coaches?
Nope, except for the contractual.
But their contracts are renewed annually, if I'm not mistaken. At least they were when I was on the school committee. So the fact that they're renewed annually means that even if you're not beholden to a contract then, because they're all negotiated on an annual basis, is my understanding.
They're part of the teachers'
I don't believe
negotiations.
so. When I was on the school committee, they were negotiated once a year.
Are they really yet? I don't think so.
1 year.
They're, right, that's what I understood, so I can check on that.
I've got one other question on there.
Correct.
In the second paragraph, it said, instead, these increases were handled by line item transfers at the end of the year.
Correct.
So by other accounts having some money left over, you transfer it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so if items were over budgeted, then that money would be transferred.
Okay,
That
so-
happens consistently, throughout the year. We take a little bit from here and move it there as we need to.
So let me throw this in, because we're going to do an increase in the line item of $34,000, these increases that will be there at the end of the year will stay in the Hampshire Regional's budget to be spent elsewhere.
It's possible, yes.
If you're doing it every year, it's there.
But it's always been there, right.
It's like a windfall, if you will, of $34,000 because it's new money. You're transferring, but you're not giving any back from the other line items.
Well, but in order to meet level service, there's still other expenditures that have increased over time, too.
It's not detailed in any way.
That's not, yeah.
All right, so let me,
I went to the school committee meeting when the budget
Yeah.
was voted, and the principal said that this money was for coaches' salary increases because they haven't had it in a couple of years.
know what she,
That's what I heard.
okay,
That's what I heard.
so what the intent to say there was that those had always been funded in a different way by the line item transfers.
Again, we're not picking on you. You just have
No,
to be at
that's
the
fine,
podium.
I'm the messenger.
I'm just telling you what I heard from the principal.
The January 9th meeting that I had told you guys about.
Okay.
Tamara Lunas, 298. Back in 2017, I told you guys that they were going to go over all of this in great detail on the January 9th meeting. And that was the one, nobody from Southampton showed up.
Except the 6 representatives,
From,
Southampton.
yes, we were there, and
That would be
that's where it
something.
was detailed out, and it made sense to do the level funding at that point. And that's what this was. We kept telling them over and over that we did not want increases in anything else because we knew it was going to be a very tight school year for our elementary. And that's why we had asked that you guys come so that you would hear all of it and not come on the date that we are actually voting.
But if you didn't want the increases, why did 5 out of 6 vote for them? That would have been a good time to say, we're not voting for it, we need to.
So
Relook
you'd
at
want to have no representation on that budget for Southampton at all by having us abstain?
No, you could
You can
vote
vote
no.
against it.
Vote
And vote-
against it, so you could table it and relook at it again and go over the dire.
But we had done that back in January and February, and now it was March and they were voting on it.
It sounds like you said you brought up the issue that. if
Way
we-
back in November and December when we were meeting, I kept stressing it at every meeting.
But why not vote against it if you weren't comfortable with the increase, I guess is the question.
But I was comfortable with the increase because it made sense with what was needed.
Okay.
It wasn't adding all the extra items that could have been added.
But it is not a level service budget.
Yeah.
I mean, it's approved, where the only chance we have to do anything at this point is to have 2 towns not approve it. But to say that it's a level service budget is erroneous. You're adding .4 of an adjustment counselor, you know, if they're taking $32,000 out of a different line item and adding it to the budget here, then there is $32,000 somewhere else. That is, some increase is happening somewhere. So it's totally fine. I mean, it's done, what's done is done, but I don't consider it a level service budget.
Right.
Yeah, well, by not adding that .4,
Let me continue.
Yep.
Tammy, you said January 9th, the select board didn't appear at the Hampshire Regional School meeting. January 9th, the select board had a meeting here. I was trying to figure out why we didn't go there, because I remember you asking. Well, that's why, because that was our regular scheduled meeting here.
January 8th, excuse me, January 8th, it's a Monday is when we met.
All right, well,
We meet on Monday, first Monday of the month.
So I'll continue on. The second request was to hire an additional van driver. So this year we have an incoming, or next year we'll have an incoming 7th grader who requires specialized transportation due to that student's IEP. So there's a couple ways that we can manage that student's transportation. One is to participate in a van pool, which costs anywhere from $90 to $240 per day for one student. If that van then picks up any other students, they charge a similar amount per student, even if that student's on the same street, in the same block, in the same area. So the option that Principal Smitty put forward instead is to hire an additional van driver, and that allows Hampshire Regional to pick up this student and possibly complete other routes, including the route to Westfield Vocational. So, for example, she's analyzed the bus routes, concluded that with one additional van driver, we could bring a student or students to Westfield Voc, pick up the students with the IEP and take to Hampshire Regional for the 7:30 start time, and then transport 2 other students, one elementary and one high school, who currently attend Neary in Holyoke, because we are legally obligated to provide transportation for those students as well, because they have IEPs and they are out-of-district placements at a private school. So we are legally obligated to provide that. So we could charge a minimal fee if we were funding perhaps the student who heads to Westfield Voc, and the same would apply for the other towns. There would be a minimal fee. But that would also save Norris some money as well. So the option is this could be in the transportation budget, or it could be transparent, and this is how we'd like to handle this, because we feel like over time that that's something that will save us a considerable amount of money. And as you know, the transportation budget is never fully funded by the legislature, and Principal Smitty is always very conservative in estimating what we think that's going to be, because we do not want to get burned.
So is this additional line item, or did you reduce vocational training?
So this is an additional line item. Okay. So in order to be conservative, the principal chose to keep transportation costs similar, because again, we don't know exactly what those are going to be.
Okay, so it comes through as an additional cost, so.
Correct.
So between the two, we've already got 50,000 close to, or
Right.
60,000.
Right.
65,000.
It comes in additional costs, but it should be able to save some of those transportation costs.
Right. Does that money come back to us?
No, it never comes back to,
It
no.
stays with the school?
It stays with the school
So
and
you
can
reuse it for
possibly
other
meet
things.
other needs.
Okay, so,
We started with a list of about 12 items that the principal felt the school needs, and we slashed and burned, and we got down to 3 things.
I don't think we've seen slash and burn yet, you know, on
Compared to
Norris and the others.
what we've been looking at, compared to what some of the needs are.
But I mean, you've got some additions in here, and there's no reductions in the line items, I guess is.
Well, the
We're not saying they're
transportation
not
would,
needed,
the
but-
transportation would likely go down. And this is to be something over time, because we don't know, we might get someone in the middle. So one of the things that is the challenge is if we get someone in the middle of the year who has an IEP, and we are then required to provide transportation for that person, we have to provide transportation.
Agreed.
And that comes out of the budget.
Yeah.
So there has to be a certain amount of contingency within the budget to allow for those kinds of situations that come in, because we have no choice. Last year, we had a student require a 1-to-1 nurse that cost us about $130,000 a year.
But I guess what I'm saying is, where there's a debit, there should be a credit. Otherwise, it's a net increase, which is what this is.
Because we don't know what additional costs might come forward.
If you didn't-
Correct, yes.
If
But
you
if you're
didn't hire
looking
this
at the bottom line.
additional van driver, the transportation budget would still be as it is. You wouldn't increase the transportation budget. You'll see how it went during the year.
Right.
So they're net
That's
increases.
fine,
yeah.
I understand that. And then the last is the school adjustment counselor. So school adjustment counselor, those are different than guidance counselors. These are people who work with our students who have IEPs and 504 plans. And these are also people who work with some of our at-risk for behavior students. And so these two counselors, we have one full-time, 1.6, and you can see that the workload that they have. They have 75 students that they see per IEPs and 504s. 57 students are seen on a weekly basis. There are additional at-risk students identified by the administration. There are 3 regular support groups, but most critically probably is this transition intervention program, which is a new program at the school, and that helps reacclimate students who've been absent. So we are seeing a number of students who are leaving for a variety of reasons, usually mental health issues. It could also be a physical accident of some sort, but usually it's a mental health issue of some sort, suicide ideation, etc. And so this program allows daily check-in, and it allows us, most importantly, to keep these students. And so we believe that by adding this additional 0.4, a school adjustment counselor will be able to retain students who might otherwise be a danger of, but we can't quantify that for you. I mean, so that is one that we know from experience that we're able to retain students. And we feel like we are at risk because of the workload of these school adjustment counselors, that we have a couple students who are kind of on the bubble in that situation. I cannot quantify that for you, but that's something that we felt strongly about, that we need to meet current needs, because the need is there. Those adjustment counselors are working more than their contracted hours right now.
Okay. Makes sense.
Any other questions?
Thank you. It's good to have this in writing.
I do not for a second doubt the need for additional adjustment counselor hours. We know what's going on in schools across the country. I also believe that the Norris School needs a math interventionist. So there's the difference.
You want to get into the hypothetical if the override doesn't pass?
Sure. Might as well face reality.
Might as well face the reality of
what could be reality right now.
Yeah.
So basically, in the first tier of my budget scenario, if the override does not pass, was the fact that the Hampshire regional school budget did not pass in 2 member towns. And at that level, it would be I would suggest removing the conservation agent funding of $10,000, $2,000 reduction to police overtime, reduction of legal expenses of another $5,000, which would bring it back to the $25,000 level. Reduction of police equipment expenses of $3,000. Reduction of general highway expenses of $10,000, which means not repairing as many roads or potholes. Reduction of library expenses of $3,500. Reduction of town administrator's expenses of $750. Reduction of miscellaneous expenses of $3,600. Eliminate the ambulance third shift for $45,000. Municipal reduction of workforce of 6 employees, and this would be spread around. It would probably hit all departments as far as police, fire, highway. It would come into town hall to the extent of most departments. There are some positions that contractually or statutorily we have to have, but it would mean a reduction of services across the board at that level. As you reduce and lay off those people, you would incur about $35,000 in increased unemployment. So that has to be added back in. At that level, that would have been about $153,000 in additional cuts. Now, that was on the assumption that the Hampshire regional budget did not pass, and what came back to us would be, on our assessment, about half of what it is now. So it would be another possible reduction of $150,000 to more municipal services. Some of the things I just threw out, is it, possible to not do a yearly audit for the cost of $22,500? However, that is in our bylaws, so that would be a bylaw violation. What would be the penalties or occurrence of putting off our required OPEB study for another year? That's $9,500. Then we get right back into more municipal layoffs. And of another 6 employees, but to save $105,000, unemployment costs are going to increase by $35,000. And again, this is just going to be more to the police, the fire, ambulance services, the library, and then you just get into how much can you save if you reduce town hall hours further? Could you close the library for a day and save on some hourly wages that way, and save laying off a person? But this gets into reduction in police, fire, and ambulance response times, reduction in filling potholes, slower plowing the streets, mowing and maintaining the parks and cemeteries is not going to be as frequent, so it's going to affect.
So basically what you're saying is just turn the light off when you leave?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know my door is going to be constantly used of people coming in and complaining. There's no doubt about
I
it.
mean, 12 people from the non-school side, the municipal side, we don't, fire, it won't really touch fire because they're on call. It just cut their budget.
Well,
You can't take it from police and highway and library and all that stuff. There's no,
But you have,
oh, you have to, but there's not 12 people.
well, no, but
We'd have to look at, regionalized policing or, something like that, dispatching, because you can't cut that many people from the fire, or police rather.
right, and then that's where you get into, okay, pretty much at that point in time, and the Board of Selectmen can say, we don't want to touch that service, so we're going to have to go elsewhere, that's where you're definitely getting into.
Well, I hate to
Probably
say,
not having a second or third shift on the ambulance and having to rely on,
well, even if you farm that out, it's going to cost more. We've already looked into that. And if we don't lay off the people in the highway and police, it goes to the school. The school's the only other big employer, it just, cascades down the hill.
but unfortunately, this is where we would be and what we would have to do.
And we'd be sacrificing our fire department license, right?
Yep.
Our ambulance, yes,
Yep.
they would probably,
Ambulance and-
have to be dropped back to basic.
Yeah, then we'd have to have all the intercepts from Easthampton and Westfield, which is going to cost, we won't get any money from that.
Correct.
It'll cost more.
And it won't, I don't know if it costs us, it costs the patient.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
I just have,
Only if you have some good news
No,
or ideas.
no, I just have some questions. So Matt Rowland, 16 Mountain Road. Couple things. So first, I think as a general rule, it's at some point in time we're going to have to look at if all boats are going to rise together, then all boats kind of have to sink together. We kind of got into a little bit of that tonight, but we're all in this together. So, boats rise together, boats fall together, and I think we need to look at how to make that happen at some point in the future. But that's definitely a futuristic conversation. But I just have a couple of questions on these lines, Ed.
Sure.
6 employees at $105,000. I mean, how much are these people actually making? I mean, by my math, that's
20
under $20,000 a year. I mean, that's not 6 people. I mean, are people making $20,000 a
We
year?
have people that are, working less than 20 hours a week.
Sure, so is
they're
that, so
working
part-timers?
Well,
Okay,
once you hit 20, you're actually,
considered, okay.
But do we have 6 people under 20 hours a week?
no, like I said, you're gonna hit your highway
Okay,
department. You're
but
gonna hit-
Matt's point is that
Well, I'm just asking
105,000
that because like 105,000 for 6 people doesn't really add up, and then, just to me, and then also, so I think it might be less, which I guess maybe is good news, which you were hoping for, John. And then, I guess to add into the bad news is I think that all of these assumptions have to take into account the fact that we're gonna fund Hampshire Regional, which basically doubles all these numbers. Like, you gotta double them.
well, that's why the second set of columns.
Yeah, no, I see that. I see that, but, I don't know, I don't think 100, I think 100, I mean, if you're going 6 employees, I think it's 100, more than
I think
105,000.
you're right.
but-
I had that marked myself, but lost it in the conversation. What Matt was saying, that's probably 3 employees, 105,000. Well, I think that's important to put out there.
Well, it depends on who it is, if they're part-time, they're full-time, and what departments they are.
Well, but we don't have 12 part-time
So-
employees
I mean,
working
so
for
the
us.
last, because if they're part-time, you don't have to pay unemployment, is that correct, or do you? I don't know how that rule works, but I thought it's a full-time thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we don't have 12 employees that are under 20 hours a week,
Yeah.
I don't think, in the whole town.
No.
So I think we should correct this to say maybe 3 employees, if that's the real number, because when you're selling it, we gotta have accurate numbers. Thanks, Matt. Do you agree?
Yes.
Tammy Molinas, 298 College Highway. Ed, can you answer a question? For municipal employees working 20 hours, they have to get full benefits then? Or is that something we offer?
Once you're at 20 hours, you're definitely eligible for health insurance, which is one of the biggest costs.
With municipal? Because I know I have to work 30
Yeah.
in order to get them.
Yeah, and then from there, so the other benefits kick in proportion to as you go up. But 20 is actually the state requirement for health insurance.
And as a town, we can't raise that to, no. Okay,
I mean,
That's statutorial.
okay.
we could look at our health insurance and come up with different options for that, but that's gonna hurt them too. And that's one of the biggest things employees want,
Good evening. Barbara LaFlamme, 20 Cook Road, Southampton. One question only. What number have you put into Southampton's obligation for the Hampshire Regional School budget? Is it what they requested or a lesser number?
What they requested, because that's what we're legally bound by.
if the vote passes.
So this could be amended at the town meeting to put in a lesser number by the voters. Is that
No.
correct?
No,
No.
it's either up or down, and it's got to go down by at least 2 communities at their annual town meeting.
It
But
was-
some other community may be putting theirs in at less than requested, is that true?
They could, but it's not right. I mean, they've gotta fund fully if it gets back.
Yes or no?
Right.
And so if 2 vote no, then it comes back to, I'm sorry, I'm talking out of turn.
It comes back to the school committee, they have to relook at it, and they can come back with the same number or 200,000 less. That's up to them to
I think
come
of
up with.
45 days, as I recall.
I don't remember the time.
I think you're right, Barbara.
What?
I think you're right. I think it is 45 days.
To come back with a revised,
Just remember, this becomes a cascade effect. It means that if they're coming back, we have to have another town meeting. This whole thing just keeps rolling into summer.
Yeah.
I understand, but
I'm just
we got serious questions,
Oh, I
that's all.
know, I know.
Thank you.
What the principal explained last time is that if they don't have a budget by the time the next fiscal year starts, then the state will sort of impose a 1/12 budget, so do month to month until it's finalized.
Okay.
Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Yeah.
1/12 of what was proposed, do you know, or what was it last year?
There is a minimum, but I don't know what that formula
Okay,
is.
so they do the minimum, boy, you could be behind the 8 ball on that one, too.
Right.
Tammy, come on up. Oh, by the way, I have requested a microphone in the ceiling so that we can pick people up, but that also means the private conversations going on in the background are going to be televised. That's been this Achilles heel of trying to make sure people go to the podium and don't go to the podium.
Tamara Lunas, 298 College Highway. Because we have changed how we vote in this town with our town meeting and our elections, we are now the first town to vote. Normally, the other 4 towns have voted, and we could control, have some control. If one had already, we can say no, and then you go back. But I just want, we are the first group that will be voting on this budget, and then the other towns.
So we're going to lead the vote, the field, if you will. If we vote up, the other towns know it. If we vote down, the other towns know it.
Right.
Historically, I don't think that there's ever been a case where, do you know of one where the towns did not? It's almost always passed.
It's always passed, yes. At Hampshire, it's always passed.
Virginia Ahart, 27 Fulmer Road. I was with Hampshire Regional from the second year of its existence. And several times Hampshire Regional voted it down. I have never known in all those years of the other 4 towns to cast a negative vote.
You say Hampshire Regional voted down. You mean Southampton voted it down?
Southampton.
Okay, yep.
Southampton would vote it down, and they would come back then and have to, because they had voted a smaller amount, take everything out of other lines. And a couple of years, they decided they weren't going to do that, and the court decided we would pay. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And I also want to point out that there are towns who, if they are short of funds and they do not want to hurt their school in our regional, they will have an override for the local school, and they will pass it. So what's with us?
Yeah. Can I ask you, while you're still at the podium, can I ask you a question that actually doesn't relate to that, but it relates to the budget? In your estimation, in terms of the operating budget and things that are currently being funded by the town's budget, community preservation has 3 different categories for money in there. I'm just wondering if there are anything from parks, open land, anything that you're aware of or Ed's aware of that actually applies to community preservation.
I haven't seen anything in our budget that, the people in this town are very good about if they have a project, not having it in, don't bring it to the budget,
Right,
they bring it to us.
Yeah.
So that, yeah.
I thought so. I just thought I'd ask why you
Yeah,
Thanks.
they're very good. All of the projects, and we've completed, I think, about 80, have all come from people in the community, and often are ones that would have perhaps ended up in a town budget otherwise.
Thank you. So how are we going to go forward and get this word out to the public?
Shirley, I'm wondering if you have any,
Margaret Larson, 9 David Street.
you haven't said anything yet.
Well, I'm trying to let everyone.
I know, we keep talking. So, one thing I just wanted to add is that there is a group of us on school committee who are working with the legislature to increase the transportation budget to get us to 100%. And so we've already met with several, where we have meetings coming up. We're going to Day on the Hill. There's a number of things that we're trying to do, and in terms of the amount of time that I've been kind of watching this whole process, I've never seen this much progress in as short a time. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to see some
Increase the
changes happen.
reimbursement?
Correct, because which has never been over 65-70%, even though they promised us 100,000. And the other thing we're looking at is changing the allocation for the foundation budget. So that's another one of the requests. It's a big ask, but that's legislation is being written right now. Adam Hines has kind of taken the lead on that.
Very
So
nice.
I'd
Thank
like
you.
to know that.
Appreciate
It
it.
was supposed to be funded at 100%, and it's, right now, it's 60.
60, 65, yes.
Underfunded mandate.
Janet Kane, 83 Glendale Road. I guess I just have a question on policy in our level service budget. So is there a policy in town that if somebody's been here less than a year, that the COLA doesn't apply to the person or doesn't apply to the position, and that they wouldn't even get the 2% if it passed, if the budget passed? So does the COLA apply across the board to the position? Or do we look at the individuals and their length of time and force people to wait a year and 10 months before they get a cost of living increase?
I'm sure it's in there where it says their start date, just like the benefits. So I think they have to be here. I don't have it in front of me. They
Is
have to
there
be
a
here by a
policy?
certain date. I believe there is.
I believe there is too.
Yeah.
And what is the policy?
Well, that's what I'm not remembering. I think you have to be here by a certain date. PQB should have that, I would think, on that too.
Well, it's not included in the current level service funding. So someone would have to wait a year and 10 months before they got an increase?
Nobody gets the 2%. Nobody gets
I
it.
mean, if it passes, they do.
No.
Oh, nobody does.
Nobody does.
Okay.
Nobody does.
But I guess just to figure out the level service, I just want to make sure we're being fair across the board, that
And
if there
nobody gets
is...
it.
I understand, but you have a level service budget where some people haven't received COLAs in that level service budget.
I don't think anybody's received
one
a COLA
will
in
receive
that
a
level
COLA.
service
Yes,
budget.
in the level service budget, the wages have increased by 2% in the level service budget. If you look at the numbers, there have been increases in most wage lines from what was paid last year and what's being paid next year.
The level service or the override budget?
The level service.
That's possible. I haven't even looked. I
The
moved
level
away
service
from
that
the
we're using to,
I am not recommending the level service budget.
I understand, but I guess, if we're saying out loud that nobody's getting COLAs and yet it's in the level service budget, we just need to be consistent.
Yeah, if it's actually in here, Ed, we need to pull it out.
Yes,
But my
that's
understanding was
my
it wasn't in
point.
there.
Because it's in some, it's not in some, so it just needs to be
Yeah,
consistent.
so level service is level service, you're right. So we can get that looked at?
Can you speak to that for a minute, only because this relates to the override and what we're going to be asking for?
Yep.
So I guess I'm not understanding what you were asking. You're saying that in the level service, which is the override that we're asking for?
No.
No. Two different budgets.
Oh, okay.
The town's only gonna know about an override budget, which doesn't include 2%.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter what the level service says?
No.
Because that's
No,
not...
but I think
Well, it should be accurate.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
I was confused there.
Yeah, whatever we put out there needs to be 100% accurate, so people will trust the numbers they see.
I've been in town all my life. I've been in town government most of my adult life in some shape or form. I must be very, very upfront and say this is the first time I've seen this town budget in such a situation. If we do not have an override, we are, for lack of an easier way of saying it, eviscerating our town services on all fronts. We need to unify, we need to explain to the voters that even though we're looking at an override, this is not a fluff override question. We have to get this to pass just to maintain where we're at. And that's everyone, from the schools down to the custodian at the town hall. I've never seen it this bad. I'm gonna do what I can to explain things to people. our biggest problem that I see is that we don't have a core way of getting out to our residents anymore. We used to have a local newspaper. We used to be able to stop at the coffee shop and talk to people and stuff. We've become very transit. Everything is now high-tech with Twitter and Facebook and stuff of that nature. We have a cable access channel that we're trying to utilize and expand, but we have a lot of people that don't even have cable. Tammy doesn't have cable. You would think Tammy would have cable. But all kidding aside, we have an uphill battle here, but we have to work together to do this. I think that sums it up. I guess my question is going to be this to the board and to the town administrator. This has all been put on the table in front of us. I think we need to make our decisions at the next selectmen's meeting and go from there.
I guess the problem that we've always had is,
I'll let you talk, Matt.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 100% of the cuts have to come out of 2/3 of the budget. You know, and that's where we're going to have an issue again.
Ed, any thoughts? All right, be that way. Matt, you're up.
All right, so Matt Rowland, 16 Mountain Road. So I'm participating in a task force. We're all on the same page here trying to get this passed. I think, this is my own opinion, but I think it's shared by others, that it's better to know how painful this is going to be as far in advance as possible. And so what I mean is that this is, I mean, the boats are going to sink together in you know, the 4 main services: police, fire, school, and highway. And so there's going to be a number assigned to each of them. I think what we should really bear down on is what the number to each of them is. So you have, it's bullet point one, number 1 in each of the 4 services. You can create a 1-pager on this. Highway, everyone's got their number, and then maybe a bullet point underneath as to what that means, like simple math stuff. You know, each person in this department makes this amount of money, so it's, you know, 1 policeman, 1 firefighter, several municipal agents, highway people, obviously a bunch of teachers. Or, you know, then you can go into the argument, you know, on the highway it'll be more potholes, less plowing, et cetera, and so, you know, 3rd shift ambulance, less police coverage. You know, it's a couple bullet points for each of the 4 municipalities. I think the sooner we have that in like hard number form, the more the people that we met with last night can get it out. And Charlie, I totally agree with you. We don't have, like, it's a transit society, it's a tech society. We don't have a meeting point, but there are people that are willing to do this work and to walk around and hand it out, provide personal money even to mail it if that's what we have to do. And the sooner we have that, the sooner people can step up to the plate personally and just do it. But if we wait till the last minute, like, there's no way we're going to be able to educate. And I said this last meeting, my biggest fear is that people, and I can only speak for myself, walk into that ballot box on May 15th and think that checking the box for a balanced budget means I would get the same thing that I had last year. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. It's basically insanity. It's ignorance, but it's also like, that's what they think, and that's what I would have thought too had I not gotten engaged. And now that I'm engaged, this is not good. I would never in my right mind do that. And so you want to just show people what their right mind is, and the only way to do that is to give it to them. And so I know that this is hard, but I think if, in combination with Ed and the 4 select board people, this is going to be a hard pill to swallow for everybody that reports to you. Highway director, police director, they're all going to be on your door the minute you come up with these numbers. If the 5 of you can unify, come up with the numbers and stand by them and instruct the people that come into your office over the next 2 months trying to basically save themselves and their department at the expense of, you know, I'll just use the example, like, it's anyone. So police chief walks in and says, save me, save me, save me, and it's at the expense of the fire, highway, and the school, and every other chief comes in and does the same thing. If you guys just hold the line and just say, look, guys, you're using your energy in the wrong way. Go get all the people that work underneath you to come in and vote. Get 10 of their friends to come in and vote. Get their families to come in and vote. Use your energy otherwise, because this is what it is. Like, we can fight about this after the fact, but if we vote it up, we're all good. You're using your energy in the wrong ways, coming into our offices and basically trying to fight for your own cause, right? So I think it's just, we got to get the numbers out there, then you got to defend that tell them to go on their own and do what we're doing, which is get the message out, get their friends, and get people in to vote that are likely to vote it up.
That's the key.
Which is the key.
Two battles here. First battle is town meeting. Second battle is the ballot box.
Yeah, which can come up with entirely different votes.
Yeah.
Typically it does. Town meeting usually has approved the better budgets.
That's because the
It's
hands
an
go
open
in the
budget,
air.
it's an open voting.
Yeah, it's open voting, there's peer pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's obvious. All right. So that, the numbers, the sooner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
no,
we
we're
agree
on the same
wholeheartedly.
Assuming that Hampshire Regional passes, though, like, but we have to
We
draw
are
that.
assuming that.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
The other thing I just wanted to mention too, Ed, is last year there was a difference with the Finance Committee and caused problems. I know that you had said at the get-go that there was even tighter recommendations from them.
Yes.
Can we hope that the Finance Committee is in support of the override?
We shouldn't hope it, we should ask them.
Well, I think that,
I wanted to get in. My name's Francine Tishman, 83 Glendale Road. I'm a member of the Finance Committee. And I just want to report that a committee as a whole has really not, because the process has changed, we've not really weighed in. I mean, we've seen, as of Monday, kind of this version,
Right.
but because we're less involved, we see none of the detail, none of the backup, in order to have some input into the process. If we understood what was behind some of these numbers and increases and so forth, maybe we could make some recommendations. I mean, but other than, I know Mike has been attending the finance team, and I think his point is a good one of let's roll it back to the original 18 budget and start with that as a way of looking and you know, at least level playing field and then work from there. But certainly this is something we want to be dedicated to and have input into. And the timeline is short. We haven't had a full meeting with yourself or the finance team yet, with the finance committee. And so as soon as that happens, we'll come in with our recommendations.
But Mike is attending the meeting,
He
correct?
is attending the finance team meetings, but
That's
I
important.
believe there is to be a meeting between the finance team and the full finance committee, which has not yet happened, correct?
no, it has not.
Okay.
And when you say rolling back to the previous budget, are we talking about one position that ended up changing, or are we talking about more?
We're talking about decisions that were made in January
Right, at the special
that
town meeting?
affected the budget,
Right, right.
that moved it from the original budget that the town passed for
Yeah.
fiscal year 18.
Mhm.
That's what we're
Is
talking
it
about.
just one position that we're talking about?
No, they're talking about everything.
It was a
Okay.
third shift and fire.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay?
Yeah, there was a
So,
couple
I mean, that's one
increases.
start, that's one recommendation that came forward.
Okay.
But there may be others, depending upon, you know, how deep we get into this.
Yeah.
But we want to help. I mean, that's why we're here.
I
Thank
agree.
you.
So, I mean, when I see what's happening, if the school, Hampshire regional budget stays, what's happening to the fire department, I mean, we're getting rid of second and third shift according to this, which obviously we've got to fine tune, but we've got a lot of folks in town who use that ambulance and, you know, on a regular basis, so I don't know how the town folks will feel about that.
Since we've been here, an ambulance and 2 fire trucks have gone by.
With the sirens going.
That way?
Yeah.
Oh, that way?
It seems to be going towards your house.
That isn't
My
funny.
house is in the same direction, though.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Tammy-
but, I'm sorry, what Matt was saying, I think this is a great start, because this is the first time we get to see it and go over it, and we just got to refine it, and,
Yeah, we can't do it tonight. We got
Oh,
to
no,
just go
no.
back.
Right.
The finance team has to get together,
yeah, I agree.
go through this. This is.
But at least we've got a good view of this, and, you know, we can fine tune it.
Tammy Walunas, 298 College Highway. Ed, Charlie, last night's meeting, I don't know, have you guys reached out to Hampshire Regional and all the new voters that are coming into age by May 1st that can vote May 15th? Has anybody reached out to say, hey, you know, make sure you get registered with the town? And I don't know if that was discussed last night at all.
Well, I was.
Not while I
No.
was there. Not discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there is the street list that has the ages, so that's one strategy that might be a good one.
And you were talking about social media. I mean, that's the way the younger folks are going to get this information.
Cheryl Fletcher, Gun Road. So I am a numbers person too, so I agree with the comments about the tighter the numbers are that folks can look at. I know it's not a lot, but if I'm looking at this and I see reduction of miscellaneous expenses, $3,600, it was even mentioned last night. So someone's going to say, well, what is that? What's miscellaneous expenses? If you can reduce it by $3,600, how much is there? So the more that this is not just general numbers and that people see it and can really understand, and it can be as close as possible to true impact, I think is really important. And someone last night had on their laptop, and I think it's really important too, that people cannot figure out, if you're not a numbers person, what is the impact to their taxes. So someone last night had said, you know, she had a chart on her laptop, and it was like, if my property value was $450,000, this is what the impact is. I'm a visual person, I'm a numbers person. If you show it to them, and so if we're doing a one-page flyer, I really think that that is really important, because people can't figure it out. They just say, here, a tax increase, you know, they're not going to vote for it. But if you show them the impact, and it's, you know, a couple $100 or whatever it comes out to be based on the evaluation, I think it will help sell it. So I just think that I agree with Matt that the sooner the numbers are really, really defined, the better we all have, because I think everybody wants to sell it. So.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Ed, I guess it's in your corner with the finance team.
You want that?
What is that?
You
think I could see that?
You said you were going to ask the question last night. She
Oh, yes.
basically just did.
I know she did, and I'm glad she reminded you to remind me.
So-
One of the questions was, how much money would it be for a tax increase? The other question was, how much debt are we retiring?
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I need a good kick in the side of the head every now and then.
Yeah, by a horse.
There's a lot of love here, Matt.
Basically for $552,000. If you look at and just say the $552,000, that equates to about 80 cents per thousand on the tax rate. So on what we have on the books for an average single-family house, which is $274,000, that is $219.31 for the year, $54.83 a quarter, or $18.28 a month. Now, if you want to use the argument that yes, we have $138,000 in debt exclusion coming off, and say, if you looked at that and said, what would be the increase over what you're currently paying, then that would be $164.48 for the year, $41.12 per quarter, and $13.71 per month.
Dan Pellegrini, 76 Crooked Ledge Road. The problem I have with what you just put out there, Ed, is a lot goes for $140,000 in town. You said medium household or medium price of $270.
I said average. Median will be different, you know that.
All right, average. But there's no way that's even an average in this town. That's what I'm getting at. So
it is the average.
So double that number up a little bit, because more houses are $400,000 to $500,000.
And there's some that are less than that, but yes.
I understand.
The new ones are as high as 700.
So, and again, I don't know which way I'm going to go as a resident on this, but at the end of the day, I think what we need to show is a little tightening of the belt either way. You know, I believe there's a $250,000 dump truck on the agenda here a little later on tonight.
Yes, there is, right.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're here struggling to figure out how to make ends meet, but yet we're going to continue to talk about a $250,000 dump truck and a $65,000 lawnmower. So
It's not part of the operating budget.
Yeah.
But it can be pulled forward, but the free cash can be pulled forward to balance the budget.
Let us get to that.
All right, but that's all I'm getting at here is we paint a picture of we need the money, but we spend it and let it just pour through our hand to one hand, and the other hand we say we don't have it. So I'm saying if we want this to pass, we better show where we're cutting some money.
think there are a lot, I think there are a lot of sacrifices,
Let
frankly.
me sort of address Dan's, the whole purpose of having articles on this is so that everybody in town can see what's being asked for. That is not an endorsement by this board, like that dump truck, that's moving forward. It's a request.
But why even allow that as the management of the town? So if I run my business and I go to my business leaders and I know we don't have the money and I allow them to continue to ask for this and spin our wheels on it, you're not managing it properly.
I disagree with you. You, as a private business owner, operate a business in a private environment. This is a public dominion. As a public dominion, we have to take and let our voters know what is being requested. It doesn't mean that we're endorsing it, but it's a public forum.
But Charlie, there's many things that you haven't brought forward. And in this condition, do you really think bringing a $250,000 dump truck forward is the right move?
I didn't say it was. You did.
I'm asking why it's still on there. And all I'm saying is the perception of the people in the town is if you want more money, you have to show that we're being more responsible with the money you have. And the problem with the 2.5 override is it never ends. And so it gets us out of this hole today, but the problem is it leaves more money in this hand for us to just let it fall through and not be responsible with it. And that's all I'm saying is we have to be responsible with our money.
And that's why an open form of government is what you see being practiced.
So bringing balance to the discussion, which is all pass, and bringing the balance that, hey, look it, no one wants to see services cut, but we all got to tighten our belt. I don't just buy everything in my house that I walk by and like. I don't allow my kids to dictate everything we buy. We have to tighten. I'm saying management in this town needs to tighten it up and get more rein from our departments. I mean, a 2% increase, which was just talked about, on a level service for salaries should have never been accepted. We should have never even looked at it. On the level service, there was a 2% increase for most departments, and we should never accept that. As management, we should have pushed it back and said, no, do not even put an increase. But we allowed it to come forward, and we allowed our employees to think about that.
Yeah, it's terrible allowing the employees to think, I know, but
No,
it's got to come forward, we look at it, and we push it back. Like we said, we don't want 2%.
This is my point, we got to tighten the belt, we never stop spending.
We do that all the time. And it's in the level service, which I think we found out tonight that we don't want in the level service, we want it taken out. So that's what we told them. You know, it's not as if this is the first time we've heard that we've got to tighten our budget. We've been doing it every year. I had a point.
There's a lot of points here.
No, I understand.
All right.
It was a good one, too.
I'm going to move this meeting on because we've been on the budget for an hour and a half. That's not saying it's not important, but it's been an hour and a half. We need to circle back. We need to let the Finance Committee tie up with the Finance team and get back to us what's going to end up being the final numbers here.
What I was going to say is, if we can get these numbers and we can do some fine tuning, we should set up some meetings soon. I mean, we're going to have to meet a couple times a week or something. That's fine.
I have no problem setting up meetings, but I think the first thing is to let the Finance team get together with the Finance Committee and get back to us with where they think we should be going.
Well, I think we need to guide them where they should be going, and I don't know when it's going to be with the Finance Committee, can meet with the Finance team. If all of a sudden this rolls 2 weeks down the road, that's way too
I
far.
don't want it to roll 2 weeks down the road.
So, pardon me? Well, I think we
At
need
this point,
to,
we're just meeting weekly, so I think we would be open at any time. We have a meeting on Monday, and we're scheduled a meeting for the following Monday, because we know it's budget time. So whenever we're ready.
it's safe to assume that Mike is bringing it back to you folks.
Yes, yeah, he is. But again, we have not had thorough discussion or have been in the position of asking questions of the people who developed this budget so that we could come up with some recommendations. I know Mike has, and he's reported back, but I do think that, with 3 or 4 other people on the committee, we would have some input into this process also.
Meeting Monday night, because it's right after our financial team meeting anyway.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, because we're not holding up, we've been waiting for it, and the only thing we've seen is the level service budget, which again had increases, and that's what really threw us off last week in our meeting. Is we expected to see a balanced budget, and what we got was a level service budget, and that's all we've seen. And then when we start boring into that, we see increases. And that is not even a level service. So we're ready to go. We are absolutely ready to go look at it.
We don't have a board meeting scheduled next Tuesday. If you're meeting with the finance team on Monday, then meeting with the finance committee on Monday night, can we?
You want me to call time?
I'm trying to do like, I've
Can
only
we
gonna
have
talk for a half
Can
second.
we have a meeting next Tuesday to discuss what was talked about at the other two meetings?
Okay.
You good with that?
Next Tuesday?
Yeah. Yeah, it's budget
We
time.
moved this to Thursday because of somebody on vacation.
Today, this week?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can meet Tuesday.
I wouldn't have done it for him, but, you know.
Will Tuesday have the hard numbers? Can you guys schedule
I don't know.
a date for the hard numbers?
I mean, we can do it Wednesday.
That's what I want to see.
That's what we need, is the hard numbers.
Yeah, we can do it Wednesday.
Yeah.
I guess the point is, we need to meet next week.
I'd rather meet Tuesday if there's a,
Tuesday's fine with me.
Okay, but to the point, are we gonna have enough numbers from finance and
By department.
finance team?
What do you think, Ed?
I mean, if what you present to the finance committee makes sense to them, then it's easy. If they have issues, you're gonna be working Tuesday and changing them.
But you'll at least get some feedback, so I'd say it's worth it.
Okay. So can we schedule for next Tuesday? Only because I love this so much, let's do it at 5 o'clock. Can you do 5? Or no?
Yep.
Charlie? Yeah, I mean,
5:30 would be a little bit easier.
5:30? I mean, 5:30 is good with me.
Is that just Board of Selectmen for finance, or is that open?
Oh, they're all open, yeah. Hopefully, can you also, Finance Committee, schedule a joint meeting maybe on Tuesday and come prepared?
We'll try, I'll get an email out and see.
Thank you.
Amy, do you really see me stopping people from speaking constantly?
And, okay. I regained my thought, but I wrote it down, so go ahead.
I feel better already and haven't spoken. Yeah, I do. I can go sit down.
Great job, I appreciate that.
Cheers. We all know this, but the warrant for the Robert Floyd, 15 East Street, the warrant for the annual town meeting needs to be posted in 32 days, by 32 days.
So that's the 29th of March, something like that?
April.
Oh,
Yeah, it's not the
April, yeah,
29th,
right,
but, yeah.
okay.
A week before the May 1st, which is the annual town meeting. So starting tomorrow, day 1, to the Monday before, the week before, it's 32. Thank you.
Thank you.
What I was going to say is, and this is, I've been harping on this for years, we come up with a budget, it's going to be a tough budget, it's going to be what it's going to be, but we don't always keep the departments sticking to the budgets that they have. They need more money here, they need more money there. It's got to be really clear from day one that this is what you got. You figure it out along the way, and if you need to have a furlough, you need to lay somebody off mid-year, that's what you need to do, but don't come back. I mean, I can't see any other way for this working, you know? And that's how I have to run it, you know? Once I know what my money is, I figure it out going forward. And we got to run it like a $17 million business. And I remember at a town meeting years ago, I said, we got to run it like a business. And a couple of people in the audience said, this isn't a business. It is a business. I'm sorry, but you know what? It is a business. And that's why I think we need to hire a treasurer, hire a town clerk. And my analogy I used 5 years ago is when somebody leaves, you don't go out to the production room floor and say, is anybody interested? It pays $50,000, come on in. That's what we do. One time we had an unemployed painter running for treasurer. And God help us, you know, if somebody like that gets in. Pardon?
Maybe he was good. Just because he was a painter doesn't
He
mean
had-
that he didn't know.
He had no business financial. I mean, we need somebody that is qualified to do this. And I know at town meeting, people are gonna get up and say, no, we can't do that. But, you know, how do you manage a town with, we're very lucky with Donna, we're very lucky with Janine, but that always hasn't been the case. We were, am I talking too much?
We're supposed to be talking about the budget. You've wandered off into about three.
It all relates to the budget, though. If we don't manage ourselves wisely, yeah, if we don't manage ourselves wisely by having the right staff in place, then,
All right.
you know, I'll give the box to somebody else, but.
The summary is we're meeting next Tuesday at 5:30. The finance team is meeting on Monday, and we'll see where we're at. Okay?
What is our objective for next Tuesday's meeting? I'd like to back, just so we know.
I would like to finalize what we are going to propose as the budget by next Tuesday. Balance, two budgets. One, if an override's approved, and two, if the override isn't approved. Right. And, but, because the town meeting, we're going to need to present two budgets. Yeah.
The only change from what you've put down here, Ed, that I would support is what I mentioned about the seniors. A director in our town is being paid for on a grant, and the money is being used is supposed to be for seniors. A town like Granby that actually is comparable to Southampton, we pay, our budget is about, 25% of what they pay for their seniors. And I just feel like that grant money is supposed to be for seniors, and we're using it for the director's salary. I don't know any other director in the town that's being paid on a grant.
Okay, I'm moving this meeting forward to the next item. The next item is quite open-ended. Is there any other necessary business that cannot wait until April 4th? If not,
I believe that actually,
Oh, yeah,
the forum is coming up for our chapter lands on Thursday, April 5th. And two of the members that are trying to put it together would like to know if it would be all right to see if town council, in this case Katie, would be available via phone or web conference
Right.
for that meeting.
phone or web, sure. I don't want to pay,
Yeah.
having to drive out from Boston.
What we're talking about is maybe setting up a Zoom conference so we can see her and people can see us. We can do
Do
that.
they have the technology in the room you're using?
It's only internet connection. Do we have that at Norris?
That's what I'm asking.
A projector, internet connection, and I can set up a Zoom, or Rini can set up a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Just.
Yeah, I have a
just
hotspot too, yeah.
Just make sure that, I'm just saying that because too many times people say we're gonna set things up and then they're missing the hotspot or they're
Okay.
missing.
Well, the backup could be, by phone.
Yeah, so we're having a forum, and it's a forum because we may not have a quorum for the select board. April 5th, is it?
Yeah.
6 o'clock at Norris School to discuss the interest of chapter lands, whether we only have a small group interested or we have a wider group interested in the town, and kind of discuss how we want to go forward with this. So hopefully anybody interested is going to turn up.
So do we need a motion to request that of our attorney to be available for,
Have designated the chair to allow you to decide who we're gonna use it down.
oh, okay,
So basically, yeah.
okay.
I don't have an argument, I just don't wanna spend money
No,
having
we-
somebody having
we agree.
drive time coming here
Yeah,
and back,
no.
that's
It's
all.
not
We don't
worth an
want that
hour
either.
meeting, yeah.
No.
We agree.
Okay.
So Ed, would you mind contacting her and
I will take care of
starting
that.
There
her?
goes the budget.
See if she's available. Yep.
Yeah, and let me know and we'll send her the Zoom information.
Okay.
All right, with that, we have no personnel change forms, we have no licenses, warrants. I've signed off on W-18-37 for $281,897.34. Warrant W-18-37A for $2,148.26. And today, PD-18-38A for $186.30. And P-18-38A for $1,375. Those two warrants got skipped on the other two, and that's the reason I had to come in and sign them. Ed, here's copies for you, so you have them for the...
Thank you.
Okay. Town warrant for town caucus. Is that prepared and ready to go?
Yep, if I can find it here. There we go.
Your articulation of the English language is far more superior than mine.
You want me to read all of this?
That's what I said, yeah.
My articulation, yeah. Everybody grab a seat, it's a long one. Okay, warrant for annual town caucus, April 3rd, 2018, Town of Southampton, Commonwealth of Mass. To the Constable of the Town of Southampton and said county, greetings in the name of the Commonwealth of Mass. You are hereby directed to notify and warn the inhabitants of the Town of Southampton qualified to vote in election and town affairs to meet at the Town Hall, first floor meeting room, 210 College Highway in said Southampton at 7:00 p.m. Tuesday, April 3rd for the following purposes: to elect the chair to serve at the caucus, to elect the clerk to record the minutes of the caucus, to nominate candidates for election at the annual town election Tuesday, May 15, 2018 for the following offices: moderator, 1 for 1 year; town clerk, 1 for 3 years; treasurer collector, 1 for 2 years; select board members, 2 for 3 years; almoner, 1 for 4 years; assessor, 1 for 3 years; assessor, 1 for 1 year; board of health, 1 for 3 years; cemetery commissioner, 1 for 3 years; constables, 2 for 3 years; finance committee, 1 for 3 years; finance committee, 1 for 2 years; housing authority, 1 for 5 years; housing authority, 1 for 2 years; library trustees, 4 for 3 years; library trustee, 1 for 1 year; park commissioner, 1 for 5 years; park commissioner, 1 for 3 years; PPB, 1 for 3 years; planning board, 1 for 5 years; school committee HRHS, 2 for 3 years; school committee Norris, 2 for 3 years; tree warden, 1 for 1 year; water commissioner, 1 for 3 years. Polls will remain open until 9:00 p.m. You are hereby directed to serve this warrant by posting up attested copies thereof at the town hall in said Southampton, and notices of the same usual places in said town 7 days at least before the time of holding said citizens caucus. Hereof fail not and make due of the warrant with your doings thereon to the town clerk at the time and place of the aforesaid meeting, given on their oath hands of Charlie Kinnicky, John Martin, James LeBrie, Maureen Groton. Amen. You wouldn't know if this was true or not, would you? It's just-
Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve that.
I'll second it.
And I'll also encourage people to run for elected office.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
All right, the next thing is approval of minutes. Mr. LeBrie was called away. A friend of his has been hospitalized. I would prefer just passing over these minutes this time.
That's fine.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's just pass over them.
Can I back up a second? We're having a meeting next week, talking about the budget after finance team and finance committee. Could we get a email or notice out to all the department heads, Ed, to tell them what we're doing and see if we can get them here? Get their opinions? If we, yeah, and is there a way that we can put this April 5th forum on the town webpage? Tell them what's going on?
It is.
It's for the chapter land?
Yeah,
Okay.
You're going to add it to the calendar, right?
Yeah,
It's not on the calendar.
yeah. We can put it on the calendar, that'd be great.
Is that okay?
I think you're giving it to Janine. I think she has access to all the accounts, that's why I'm saying that. Okay, calendar of announcements, Selectmen's meeting, April 4th. Let's see, April 17th is up here also. We have an invitation to Worthington to participate in their 250th celebration parade, June 30th. And we have a Selectmen's meeting next week now. What day is that, March 28th?
Tuesday, yeah.
Okay. 27. telling you, I'm not
Don't do
keeping
that
up.
again.
I'm not keeping up with this. All right. Now we're moving into the articles for a Springtown meeting. This is the draft list. The first thing is to vote to join the Pioneer Valley Mosquito Control District, $5,000. I recommend the board strike that,
Why?
because we don't have any money to pay for it. Even though I was basically one of the ones that put this together and made it a legal district, I also realized with the budget the way it is, it's not gonna happen. I would much rather give the $5,000 if there was such a way of doing it to something like the Council on Aging Director or something of that nature. I think it's a necessary thing, don't get me wrong, but I just don't see where we're gonna have any extra money to do anything.
And there's no other options in terms of grants and things like that? I mean, mosquitoes, do cross
The grant,
town lines.
The grant exists. The mosquito district that is formed is the whole Pioneer Valley.
I know.
And through the programs that I worked with, we got another $150,000 to put this up and running this year. The $5,000 is just so that it's a buy-in for the community to start monitoring for diseases in this area. If we gotta play choice here between what's we have to have,
Okay.
then this doesn't make the list.
Yep.
And as somebody that's a selectman in town, if you want to ask me from my public health side, I think this is very important.
I do too.
I know that we have invasive species that are in the Connecticut area that carry other tropical diseases that are going to be migrating through this area as time goes on. And you're going to be introduced to different types of diseases.
So by not joining, what does this mean to us? We don't get information, we're not part of the collection of data?
The problem in Western Massachusetts is there is no actual mosquito control operation for surveillance. There used to be some spotty stuff done by the Department of Public Health years ago. In fact, they used to run that program. That got phased out after West Nile and all the rest of that. So what happened was a few of the cities around here started hiring a private company to collect specimens and have them tested. Nothing to the size of Southampton. Northampton was doing it for an example. They'll probably still do some monitoring. But we will not have any monitoring going on, nor will we have any type of larvicide operations to take and deal with pools that we may feel become a hazard to the residents. This is not nuisance spraying. This is not driving around with a truck and spraying the neighborhood.
Right.
So by joining the district, we get that service available
That's
out of the
right.
grant?
The grant starts opening it up to take and basically start some surveillance in this area. What'll happen over the course of years, remember the Hampshire Regional School District? If we join the district, then we become attached to other towns and how they vote. But the flip side of that is, there are, memory serves, at least 10 to 12 mosquito control districts throughout the Commonwealth. There's one out in the Berkshires, and when you get to Worcester and you head east, you really want to get into this?
No?
No.
Good. Then, there it is. There's your answer. I'm just saying, let's
Just
think
didn't see the off switch, that's all.
I don't know, you know. Why don't you just say, Charlie, you're off topic?
Well, Charlie, you would know, and if you don't think that it's imperative that we join this year for any public health crisis thing, then we'll take your recommendation on that. If you're going to be the liaison to the Board of Health, though, there is an online disease reporting tool that's supposed to be used, and we're not using it, and it doesn't, I believe, cost money. So if you could
I am on Maven,
So-
but not for Southampton.
But it doesn't cost us to do online disease reporting, and we should, so I would hope that you'd advocate for that.
So as a public health professional, you advocate that we keep this in, is what you're saying?
But as selectmen, and
Yeah.
selectmen and looking at the budget,
Yeah.
I don't see how we're going to afford this
Well,
year.
if we get an override, this won't even show up in there as a blip, but I mean, if we don't, then yeah, you're right.
I would much rather plead for an override and not have this year.
Okay.
And then sort it out next year.
Okay. I'm fine with that. You fine with that?
I am fine with that.
Okay, let's take it off.
You put me in a situation, if you're asking me about public health, I'm on one side, but I'm chairman of the select board here, so I'm trying to look at the budget.
We're going with you on the budget side.
All right, the next thing is about the fund the purchase of a highway department dump truck for $250,000.
Yep.
The discussion was to take and see if we could borrow money to do this, but given the fact that our budget is what it is, I don't see us borrowing any money because we'd still have to pay for principal and interest on that money.
Yeah, but also this, I brought this up before, and you know, and Dan brought it up tonight, is that I want to see why we need a truck worth $250,000. And it may be a valid reason, but I haven't seen anything yet to back this up, so I'd like to have Randall really come in and give us some real detailed information and maybe some alternatives to what we can do if we don't get the truck.
Well, then we are going to need to make a decision by next week on that.
I will see if I can have him and the truck here for Tuesday night.
Not the truck.
Yes, you're gonna see the truck too.
Oh, the old truck? Oh, that's fine, we may need a truck, but I can't picture a $250,000 truck. Maybe it's just me. You know, I work for this.
That is how much they go for. I've looked at it.
Yeah.
It is.
So
But
let's,
It's
Hey,
not-
I'm open for a field trip. You want to bring a dump truck here?
So
and
why
take a
don't-
walk around? I got no problem.
why don't we get him in here to explain why it's needed? I don't want to go look at a truck.
Matt Rowland, 16 Mountain, John, I love you, but we don't need to talk about the dump truck this year. I mean, we don't even need to bring it in and have a discussion about it. Like, let's be serious. Like,
We're serious, we want to find out why he thinks he needs it.
He could talk about that next year, just to be serious. Like, what,
If there is a dire need that we're not getting our roads plowed, I'd like to know that this year before winter, so.
he would have been here if that were the case, but I mean,
Can't assume that, Matt.
sure.
Can't,
No other department heads here. I'd like to hear from him.
yeah,
You know, you don't get the letters that we get copies of from townspeople complaining about potholes and snow
Yeah.
plowing, so I would like to hear what he has to say.
give him, and I think we can end the conversation here, just bring him in next week and,
All right,
yeah.
bring him in next week.
And it should be a look at what we're spending in maintenance, and we don't see an increase in maintenance costs.
So if you can,
On the highway department, it's pretty static. So at the end of the day, really justification when you go to buy a vehicle is not just because it looks old and crappy, it's how much you're spending on maintenance compared to what your
but
interest
Dan,
is.
that's what Randall needs to come in and explain, yeah. We gotta look at the whole process.
Go ahead, would you please invite Randall in here, and if he can park the dump truck outside.
Oh, no, really?
With a flashlight, because it'll be dark by the time.
Really?
Oh, that's right, it's next week. Yeah, tomorrow, next week.
Sure. Yeah,
Well, this one here has got, I know which one it is, because I took photographs of it and shared it with the board a few months ago.
well, let's not make a circus out of this. He can come in, explain it. I'm gonna believe his word. If the frame is rotted through,
I think
I'll
you should
believe
bring
it.
the truck.
I don't.
I think so.
I think it's gonna make it a circus. Do you think he should bring the truck?
Bring the
It's
truck.
not going to mean anything to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll make a motion he doesn't bring the truck. What do you think?
But if some people want to look at the truck, then bring it in.
The vehicle.
I'm not going to say no.
I don't want to turn it into a circus, that's all.
Some people want to look at the truck, have him bring it in. I don't care to look at the truck.
bring it
I
in.
want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take his word.
I think the visualization of the truck is.
Okay, you want to go on to the next one?
No, I'm having too much fun with the truck.
It's,
All right, vote to establish the town treasurer as an appointed position. I think that should stay there. Amend the current town bylaws in increasing the quorum to 50 legal voters, Article 1, Section 6, except to adjourn a meeting requested by town clerk. That's not very clear.
yeah, you can, if you have the quorum of 50, if 10 leave, you can adjourn it with 40. That's all.
Okay, it's been a long time since we've had a town meeting with less than 50 people.
But now it says 25, I believe.
All right, but anyways, I don't have an issue with that article.
Nope, me either.
Okay. I'm going to dispense with this open time for the public narrative that I usually read. Does anyone want to address the board other than Tammy? Barbara, come on up. Took me a while. Barbara, I get Tammy all primed then she goes,
whatever. Barbara LaFlamme, 20 Cook Road. I would just like to especially thank John Martin and Rainey Groden for the extra effort that they are putting in to put together the forum regarding Chapter 61. I hope that all of you will come, but especially appreciative to both of you. Thank you.
Janet Kane, 83 Glendale Road, just quickly while we're on an appreciation comment. Thank you, Rini, also for hearing the seniors. I know you're our liaison, and I hope the board will consider your recommendation. Now it's your turn, Jan.
Tammy. No coaching in the audience.
Don't
All
press
of
her.
this.
Just-
Yeah, yeah. Okay, awesome, you're great. Okay. I've been, Margaret Larson, 9 David Street. I've been madly emailing Principal Smitty because I wanted to get answers to your questions while we're out here. So, for the transportation, either way, it gets added to the budget. So if it's added in the van driver line, it gets pulled out of the transportation line.
Right.
So that would be the debit and credit
Okay.
that you were looking for.
So that was done already?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
If there is some kind of transportation savings for the Westfield Voc transport, that gets returned to the town's general fund, not into the school.
Okay.
And I don't know how it would work with Norris if there was some kind of a deal we worked out that would reduce Norris's transportation costs, but I'm not sure of the details, and she's not sure either. For the athletic coaches, they are negotiated every 3 years, along with the teachers, correct? So they've been fortunate, here's what she says, we've been fortunate to find the money in the past because we saved on fuel or electricity, but we already accounted for those lines going down next year. So that's the debit and credit that you're looking for. We could keep the same amount in the fuel line and then transfer it to coaches later, but we want to be transparent and do it correctly. And we're able to scrape together the money each year because we can't know in advance how much money we'll spend on tutoring or special ed. We've also transferred from those lines in the past, but this has been accounted for.
So that's good then.
So the only addition, I would say, would be the 0.4.
Which is 24,000, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, our percentage of that.
Well,
So
thank you for
Appreciate
getting
that.
I hope that's
information
helpful.
so
Okay.
promptly.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that makes it a whole different ballgame, yeah.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, I mean, I support the budget. It's just,
Well, I think you need clarity.
Yeah.
And that was fuzzy, and so I don't think I helped.
yeah, it helped a lot, thanks.
Good.
Tamara Lunas, 298 College Highway. At the March 6th Board of Selectmen's meeting, there were several things that were discussed about an hour and 50 minutes into the meeting. A couple of people made some comments of how things are conflicts of interest and members of the Select Board having personal dealings on purchases and members of other boards, and having large investors shouldn't be intertwined with purchases for the town. Another comment, relationships of people serving on boards and these people's long-term investments with the town, and how things are, how these people are concerning with their ethics of these people. This is a small town. Everyone is related to another person here. It is and always will be that way. With no one signing up for positions in town, you cannot punish someone for being on 2 or more committees or boards within that family. The Ethic Board should be deciding if someone is acting unethical, not us or the Board of Selectmen. and there are going to be some hard changes coming up. I, for one, would rather be on your side than against it. I'm one that's on many boards, my husband also. Don't judge us or what other people in town do. Please.
I think that's a point well taken. I also think that, as we discussed tonight with the fire chief and his wife, I think it's a small town. There are a lot of people that are related, and I think that there is still a line that everybody has to be aware of when it comes to relations and recusing yourself if you're related or involved in a situation. So apart from the fact that we're all in this together and there are a lot of relations, I still think there's a protocol for how business gets conducted. And so I would just hope that that got upheld.
But I think, to add to that, I think, at least what I took away from it, there were some assumptions made by people that just because this person was doing something, a relative over here was involved behind the scenes, and that's not true, and I don't believe that. But you're right. I mean, you can't whitewash people because they're on multiple boards or they do something as a business, as long as it doesn't conflict with the town. I mean, I don't have any issues with that. Like I said, people want to conserve chapter land. I think it's a great idea. People want to buy it and develop it. That's legal too. That's where I think that all this came from. And as long as they're doing it properly, which, as far as I know, everybody's doing it properly, it doesn't matter who your relations are, or, brother, sister, whatever. Follow the law, and that's what, if there's anything to go to the Ethics Commission, that's why they're there. You call them, you send them an email, So, yeah, no, I agree with you. And I don't, you brought yourself up, Tammy and Jim, but I don't remember anything going that direction, so hope you didn't take that. Yeah, it shouldn't, but yeah, no, I agree with you. So thanks for getting the courage to bring that up.
Dan Pellegrini, 76 Crooked Ledge Road. That's the beautiful thing about our government is there's checks and balances.
Yep.
And so again, I don't know if it was a whitewashing, but at the end of the day, when you hold a public position, you have to go above and beyond to make your perception, make your motions differently. And you take that choice when you run for an office. And there was enough in that transaction for there to be question. And for us to chastise citizens who question a public figure is not right either. So at the end of the day, if you want to go into a public position, you have a different level of standards that you must live up to. There's a different sets of checks and balances that you must do because you're an example for the community. So again, I don't think it was a judge and jury up here on the 6th, but again, it was people's opinions and voices, and from both sides. And at the end of the day, it's for us all to grow as a community and to do things right going forward. So, two sides to it.
But when I think an opinion based on nothing more than a relationship is thrown out there in a public forum, it doesn't help it at all.
But it's not just an opinion. When there's an actual plan put out and notice sent by the town with our money, with our intent, and then all of a sudden it gets bought. I mean, again, there's no accusing, but all the perceptions, all the things that happen were put out there. And so at the end of the day, we should have, as in town, and as a select board, if we're talking about that property over there across from Cumberland Farms, we should have pushed to go buy that in chapter money and not let it get purchased without doing it. And again, that's a step farther, but again, they're views, not opinions, views, and everyone's views should be heard.
I agree, as long as they don't impinge on somebody's, reputation unduly.
Open time in the public is not a forum for debate between the speaker and the board.
So noted.
Thank you.
That's the way it should be.
At this point in time, I'm going to be calling executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Number 7, to comply with or act under the authority of or any general or special law or federal grant in aid requirement, approval of executive session minutes February 6, 2018, 2 agenda items, and February 20th, 2018, 3 agenda items. I need a motion to go into executive session with a roll call vote.
Roden, aye.
I'll make a motion, we go into executive session.
Right, yeah, okay, thank you. I'll second it.
All in favor by roll call vote?
Roden, aye.
Martin, aye.
Kaneki, aye. We are now in executive session
And
with
we-
a 5-minute break,
Won't be coming back.
and we will not be coming back to open time.
I always forget that, so I'm sorry.
No problem.